All right. And we're live. Okay, so as always, if you're watching this not live, look below on the chapters. It's going to tell you when we start. Just going to hang out for a few minutes. And we're going to I just give it like 10 minutes for people to hop in the stream, and then we're going to start. I don't want anybody who like sees this to miss the beginning. So yeah, this is huge. So we'll just shoot the crap. Well, I can't. I think I can, but it's better to not on YouTube. But we're here. New JRE episode with Graham Hancock. Absolutely massive. Very excited. And apparently, the first 10 minutes, I saw some comments. He goes into Flint Dibble in the first 10 minutes. So actually, I'm going to put a banner up. Let's put a banner up saying we'll start in about by the little squiggly. I don't know what it's called, but I'm going to call it a little squiggly. We'll start in 10 minutes and we're going to make it scroll. There we go. We'll start in about 10 minutes. So yeah, this is what we're going to do. I can't show the video on screen or it'll show my screen off. Or it'll shut my stream off rather. So when that happens, we can't have that. So I'm going to show some images. Yeah, my bad. I am a minute late. Apologies. Welcome, Silent Blade. I think that's Byers, right? That is one of my Marines from back in the day. Thank you for joining. I was a minute late. That's better than it used to be. I used to be quite late. I was not good at estimating the amount of time, but I'm getting better. Didn't notice that I was going to be a minute late. So yeah, if you want to support the show right now, I am demonetized, not for any real reason, but because I forgot to put in the pin that they mailed to me. And so if you want to support the show, Patreon, it's $2 a month right now. Mostly because I'm not providing all that much, although you do get early and unedited episodes. And this upcoming episode, which I interviewed a wonderful woman, Amanda, who's going to come on the channel again, who about Machiavelli. She's a PhD student who teaches, I forget where, maybe U Michigan. That's probably wrong, but on Machiavelli. That was a great conversation. The unedited one is about 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 20 minutes, and that's on Patreon right now. That'll be out, I think, next week. And then after that, I should have the Graham Hancock interview coming soon, which is absolutely massive. I actually knew this was coming because I was emailing with Graham, and he told me he was in Austin, and I assumed that part of that was for this episode. I didn't tell anybody because that's private information, but I can say it now since the episode's out. And also Rebirth of the World, who is an alternative history guy. He's mixed race, he told me, Turkish, German, and American Black. So he did some alternative history stuff for like, I think he concentrates on a lot of African stuff. I was in a space with him the other day, and he was talking about the Dogon people, which is very interesting. We've mentioned them on the live streams before. And that episode should be coming out, I think, right before the Graham Hancock episode. So if you're just joining us, look at the chapters down below, and or if you're just joining us, we'll be starting in just a few minutes. I'm just letting people trickle in before we start. Usually give it about 10 minutes. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We got my Turkish friend in the comments here. Yes, Rex. 5 till midnight usually starts late, and that is almost never my fault. It's usually other people. But yeah, any questions while we're sitting here for a few minutes? This is going to be a big episode. I can't share the screen. I'll be bringing up visuals whenever they're relevant, but I cannot share the entire screen because it'll shut my stream off. Have I seen the new America season? I watched the first few episodes. Very good. And there is, in the beginning of episode 3 and maybe the end of episode 2, they bring up the banana, which some of you might know is kind of the symbol of the show here. Sometimes you'll notice people dropping banana emojis in the chat. The banana is a sacred fruit. It really is in a lot of different cultures. And there's some very specific stuff about the banana. There's this great book called Banana, very creative, by Dan Kopel. that we talked about probably about a year ago on the podcast, and the banana became a symbol of the show. And also, I haven't done it in a while, but I used to eat bananas on 5 Till Midnight, which is my other show. If you don't know, it's more of a politics show. It's with 4 other guys, all rooted in the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party, but all of us have pretty much left that. Ron Paul is what that is. That's more politics, but if you're interested, that's 5 Till Midnight on YouTube. Give us a follow over there. Hey, Mr. Coconut, give me a banana. Why he keep the long hair? Why not a mullet? I actually used to have a mullet. Yeah, Silent Blade, you are Wyatt, right? Wyatt Byers. What grades did I teach? So I got certified to teach. I never actually taught. Well, I did my internships and my student teaching, but I never actually got a job teaching. And I didn't. In Connecticut, you need a master's to teach. I think you can technically get a job, but they're phasing it out. You need to start your master's. But I was in a master's program at the University of Connecticut, and I quit my master's. But yeah, social studies. Unfortunately, like I wanted to talk about anthropology more, and I didn't want to be told what to teach so much. So I decided to just do it here. But I did my student teaching at a high school in Connecticut, 10th grade and 9th grade. I did an internship for 6th graders, which I enjoyed. I think I actually, if I had stuck with teaching, I probably would have gone the middle school route. I wasn't expecting to like that as much as I did, but I really did like the middle schoolers quite a bit. But yes, when I did my student teaching, which was a full load, 3 different classes, it was horrible. It was a lot of work. I did American government. I did 2 sections of American government for standard sophomores. I had freshman honors, world history 2, and what was the other one? I don't remember. Yeah, American government, world history 2, and then maybe that was it. Maybe it was 3 classes. It was blocks. So, or was it not blocks? I don't remember. I don't know. Teaching high school just sucks. I was just watching the news season. Yeah, I bet a lot of you were. I was thinking about doing a watch party, but like it's hard to do because I can't just stream it. All right. Yes. Thank you, Shermanator. Hit that like button. What is up, Dr. Strange Doom? We're going to start in just a couple minutes here. We got about 20 people. It's usually enough. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And once again, I cannot share the video, but I will be pulling up visuals when relevant. Just got to get a couple things ready. Go to the video details, get the customization in the YouTube Studio tab. I'm so excited, guys. This is huge. This is absolutely massive. So pumped for this. Massive. Yeah, that probably came through. So I also can't do the audio the normal way that I do. Yeah, dude. I mean, really. Excellent. What is up, my Serbian brother? I love the real diversity we have in the chat, man. We got Turks, we got Americans, we got Serbians, we got everybody. If you're not a Turk, a Serb, or an American, let me know where you're from in the chat if you want to, because I'd love to know where everyone's from. There's a Muslim chick who just hopped in the Discord. Really appreciate that. I actually didn't ask where she's from. I assume she's American because I assume everyone's American because I am an American and that's what we do. But I did not ask. I'd love to hear where everyone else is from. Love to hear about the different types of people we get in here. Yeah, I think I stopped saying this, but I used to have a mullet. I did used to have a mullet. There's a picture of me with a guy who was a Marine with me and Byers, one of my close friends. Right. Yolanda is one of my, colleagues, I guess, from the cohort. Australia, what's up, Aussie brother? Appreciate having you. Yeah, we've had some Australians before. I've gotten some donations and dollary dues, and I appreciate that from you guys. Love our fellow penal colony Anglosphere folks. And yes, Yolanda, I don't think I ever said this, but my grandfather was Hungarian. Love that you're living in Hungary. Love Hungary as a country. Michigan, fantastic. They have University of Michigan is a fantastic school. Sick. Okay, and I am from New England, obviously. Yeah, so I've been to Hungary before. I want to go back to Hungary. I actually had a plan with one of my friends to do. They do a step tribe, like, well, not it's well, yes, step people's thing, but it's like the tyrannic. It's like different people that are descended from step tribes, related step tribes. So it's like Finland and Hungary, and then like Sami people, as well as like, you know, Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, all those places. And they do that in Hungary. I think the Nomad Games, or that might be a different thing. But regardless, you're from Far East New York. I am not. Okay, Eastern New York is one of the counties in Connecticut, unfortunately, and it's the most populated one. So everyone associates Connecticut with New York, but I am from, yes, it's Finno-Ugric tribes. That's the people, but it's more broad than that. And I'm trying to remember what the name of the festival is. I'm actually going to look it up right before we start. Hungarian Steppe Festival. Oh, Great Kurultaj is what it's called, which translates to the meeting of the tribes. That's what we're talking about. They do that every year in Hungary, and I was going to go, and I will eventually, but it did they not have one? Oh, I guess they do it every 2 years. Darn it. Yeah, Azerbaijani, Avars. Some of these aren't actual countries. They're and Bulgarians as well. Some of these aren't actual countries. They're just ethnic groups that don't have a country. Yeah, it's really cool, Yolanda. You should check it out. It's in the countryside. The friend I was going with is one of my close friends, and he's a Jewish guy. And unfortunately, this is like so there's some nationalists that go there, and especially in Hungary, you got to be careful. So when we were planning on going, I was like, look, man, when we go, you're not Jewish, okay? I don't want to get us in any trouble with these people, because, you know, the right wing over in Central and Eastern Europe can get kind of scary. But yeah, great Kurultaj, and I will go. I guess it's not annual. It's every 2 years. I was going to go in 2020. Yeah, and Yolanda knows, she lives in Hungary. You do need to be careful. Yeah, especially if you're in Budapest, the capital city, you're going to be fine. But if we were going out in the countryside to a nationalistic festival, there was definitely going to be some people who would not be very fond of our Jewish brethren over there. So that was the thing. Okay, so we're gonna get started. I just got to put down the time that we're gonna go. Actually, I saw Graham Hancock posted. I'm gonna do that. I got to annotate the time for the chapters for people that join in later, and then we can get started. So give me like 2 minutes. So excited for Graham Hancock. Okay. In the meantime, anyone else? Anyone else? We got Australia, Serbia, Turkey, and the United States represented. Anyone? Anyone else? We got any other ethnic groups, religions, countries of origin, nationalities? Any other stuff anybody wants to share? I love hearing about it. I love having a diverse audience, man. And when I say diversity, unfortunately, that's become a dirty word associated with DEI and stuff. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about real human diversity. This is a cultural anthropology channel. That's what we do here. So we want to know people's different thoughts. So we're going to get started right now. I just got to annotate the time on the episode start. We are at, I'm juggling 3 monitors here. Goral Highlander. What does that mean? Limp Bizkit America. Absolutely. I'm like really pasty white. Is that exotic? Absolutely. Just always claimed to be Polish while in Hungary. My buddy, he's Jewish, but he's not. He's a ginger as well. He's mixed. And he doesn't look Jewish, so he would have been fine. I was like, dude, just tell him you're Irish. It's fine. I'm getting weird things in the comments. I'm going to reload this, actually, because the Twitter comments are coming up on top. India is here. No, they're not, Smeagol. No, they're not. Do I have a favorite All right. Are we good? I'm sorry. Right. Goral Highlander. Where is that from? Were you blocked? No, I only have one person blocked. I actually had to do that the other day. So give me a second. I'm going to share. I would like you guys to let me know how the audio is when we start. A Polish Highlander. Fantastic. Polish. Love that. Kipchak. Oh gosh. I'm reading all these comments now. I'm very interested. 2K people. J. I'm trying to remember how to pronounce that in Hungarian. Joss. I'm not sure. He's a Polish Jewish dude. I don't remember. I think he's Ashkenazi. He's part Ashkenazi. But I don't remember. The Polish was talking about was Ironheart. J is like a Y. Right. Okay. StreamYard 1630 is when the episode starts. 1630 on it. Okay, and I cannot share. You're Mexican, are you actually? Fantastic. Love the Mexicans, love the Hispanics. I post about it pretty regularly. I got that picture of me with my oh gosh, I screwed it up. We'll just go 17 episode start. All right. I'll be paying attention to the comments a little bit, but I got to start the episode. I always get too engrossed in the chat. Oh, I don't know. He could be Polish. I'll ask him next time I talk to him. All right, let's go. We're going to get started. Let me know how the audio is because I'm going to play it right now. Let me know if it's too loud and how it is compared to my voice, but we're going to play it.
Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan
how is it?
Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
Good to see you, sir. What's happening?
Good to see you too, Joe.
I watched episode 1 and I'm into episode 2 of your new season. Looks
Fantastic.
fantastic. Looks awesome.
Fantastic.
Fantastic
Thank you.
information. But before we do anything, I think we should probably address what we know now about the debate that you had with Flint Dibble.
Yes.
So last time we were here. It was. I appreciate that he came on, and I thought it was going to be an interesting discussion, but it turned out he played fast and loose with the truth.
Yes.
And distorted quite a bit of information.
I'm so excited. So excited.
Were some key points that you had discussed. One of them being the amount of shipwrecks that were discovered. He greatly inflated the amount of shipwrecks that have been discovered. And then
The Dibster.
you released a video today that went over a lot of this stuff. And one of the things that went over is the oldest shipwreck that we are currently available. It's about 4,000 years old?
About 6,000.
6,000?
The Dokos shipwreck.
But there's nothing left of the ship.
No.
And this
that's
is
right.
what's important. That what he was trying to say was that it would be preserved by the cold water. That turns out to not.
The first pause here, I actually worked, I learned cultural anthropology. I studied it from the guy who, oh no, not the Docus, but the kitten. The kitten is the oldest. It doesn't matter. Let's go.
Be the truth at all. And that these ships that are 6,000 years old, there's nothing left of the actual boat itself. The only thing that's left
in
is
the Black
pottery
Sea.
and coins and things of the like.
And especially when you consider the possibility of ships having gone through a cataclysm.
Right.
It's not likely to, but there's a more central point than that, which really needed to be brought up by the archaeologists in this, which is that archaeology universally accepts
like the
that
video,
human
please.
beings were seafarers as much as 50,000 years ago. I put the evidence on this into the video. It's not even in dispute. Like the island of Cyprus. The nearest Turkish coast is about 60 kilometers
Dibble
from
in
there.
shambles, bro.
It's always been surrounded by huge deeps. It's always been an island, even at the peak of the sea level, lowest sea level during the Ice Age. Cyprus was always an island. And yet, there's evidence
show it every
now
once in a while.
that it was settled 14,000 years ago. Certainly 14,000 to 12,500 years ago. It was settled, in other words, during the Ice Age.
I like the
these
video,
were
please.
large
I'm not your
planned
dad, but I
migrations.
appreciate
When
it.
you're going to migrate to an island, you can't just go 2 or 3 people by accident because you'll become extinct. You have to bring in quite a large population, and they reckon that populations of 1,000 or so were being brought across that water, across the ocean, across the Mediterranean Sea to Cyprus near the end of the last ice age, but not a single ship has survived to testify to that. Same with Australia. 50,000 years ago, human beings got there, and even at the lowest sea level, they would have had to cross about 90 kilometers of open water and in large numbers. And again, no ships have been found to testify to that, yet archaeologists accept that they got there by ship.
I'll do that, dude.
So to say that we haven't found any ships from the Ice Age is not really evidence about anything.
And if we're finding the oldest ships that...
Hey, I'm sorry, guys. Just got to advertise. I got to monetize this, right? I appreciate everything. All I ask is that you like and comment. I appreciate that so much. But my monetization is down right now. Won't go into detail. It'll come back. It's not anything bad. But Blue Frost, thank you so much for your support. You signed up at one of the higher tiers, and I really, really appreciate that. If you want to support the show, Patreon down below. The lowest one is only $2 a month right now, and I would really appreciate it, but not required, of course. Just want your likes and comments. Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
We currently are aware of, which is, as you said, about 6,000 years ago. If you tack on another 6,000...
So a note on shipwrecks. Wood preserves better than metal. The Titanic's going to be gone. It's going to get eaten.
Years of decay on top of that.
Sure.
What are the odds you're going to find anything?
I think the odds are very, very low.
Now, if we had that evidence and that information when we were confronting Flint, that would have been a very different conversation.
Totally.
But the arrogance in which he distributed that fake information was it's disturbing. It sucks when people just want to win and they don't want to get to the truth.
It does.
And the truth is it's very fascinating. Another thing that was very fascinating
Flint
that he
Dibble.
discussed,
I've been telling you people,
but
you
it was
guys
about
know,
seeds.
but I've been telling other people.
I asked the question, there's a very distinct, noticeable difference between domestic seeds and seeds that are wild. And the difference is the seeds that are wild, they break off easier because it makes...
No way, dude. Graham mentions me in this? 137, I have to wait for that now? Oh, my heart just exploded. Oh my God, I wish I had my watch on to check my heart rate. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's keep watching. Let's get there.
That it would help them prosper. It would help them be able to spread the seed if it broke off the plant easier. And so they can recognize that. And then when they start using large-scale agriculture, the seeds become more robust and stick to
did he mention me in his own video? I watched the whole video. I don't remember him mentioning me. Oh my gosh, he mentioned me on Joe Rogan.
To the plant, because it makes sense that it would, if you're going to harvest all of the plants and then take the seeds off of it, for the plant to prosper, you would want the seeds to be more robust. So there's these changes. And I said, have they ever noticed a domesticated seed going back and having the
I'm being so
characteristics of
feminine
a wild
right now.
seed? He said no.
Yeah.
But that's not true
That's
either.
not true either, no.
No.
It's not it's not true. And the whole notion of the origins of agriculture, I think archaeology's got a great deal more work to do on that. Often I'm misrepresented as saying that survivors of my supposed lost civilization would have brought crops with them. I think that's most unlikely in a cataclysmic situation. What they brought with them was the knowledge that crops can be domesticated. And it's precisely during the Younger Dryas that we see that shift from undomesticated to domesticated crops in the archaeological record. And what I'm suggesting is that these were people who had already conquered that problem. They'd already solved that problem. They knew it could be done, and they brought that knowledge with them and shared that knowledge with the people that they took refuge amongst.
Mythical
because I don't
ship? What do you
think
mean
we're
mythical?
looking at a mass migration. I think we're looking at a few survivors who are taking refuge after a global cataclysm.
You know, it's just very unfortunate when you have a debate and one person is an expert and they're not truthful, and it just
I think it's very bad. I think it's very bad for archaeology.
It is, because it reinforces all the things that you've been saying.
It does. I mean, to be honest, I felt beaten up after after that debate. But looking back in retrospect on the whole thing, I think it actually makes the point that we have a very arrogant, very controlling discipline in archaeology, which has established a narrative about the past and which will fight tooth and nail to maintain that narrative.
I didn't realize that.
Including using dirty tricks. And I
Was
think
it that
instead
long
of,
video, Man Network?
Smearing people who talk about the
50-minute one?
possibility of a lost civilization, or people who even talk about aliens, I think of instead of smearing them, archaeology should understand why people are asking those questions. And people are asking those questions because they're not satisfied with what archaeology is offering. It's not providing a nurturing, satisfying resolution to many of the problems that come from the past. And that's what drives me is curiosity about
I watched that whole thing. I don't know how I missed
past.
that.
I'm often misrepresented as saying that somehow I've proved that a lost civilization existed, and I don't claim to have proved that. What I do say is, join me on this journey. There are mysteries in the past. Let's see if they're explained by archaeology or if they're not explained. And I found quite a number that are not explained by archaeology, and that's particularly to do with astronomical.
This is very, very important for Graham Hancock's theories, is that, like, look, he might not be right about everything. I don't even think he's right about everything. But there are unexplained things, and there are certain things that anthropology, archaeology explains, and they say they know the answer, but they don't. They just don't, man. Like, they have a good guess for it, but it's not, their evidence is not super perfect. It's just not. So it's ridiculous what they've done. And, Graham I don't care. I want to listen. You guys know this. I'm speaking to the choir here. Thanks everyone for joining. Let's keep going. Thank you so much for being here and doing this with me. You guys know that this is my stuff, man. I'm so happy.
Alignments with traditions that are shared all around the world.
Exactly.
It's to do with,
Turkish friend.
To do with things that archaeologists by and large don't study.
This episode of the Joe Rogan Experience is brought to you by Call of Duty. You know, when a new Call of Duty of
yikes. The Trinity, incredible one. That's right.
The archaeological game. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 pre-order now. Well, it's also
Call of Duty, Black Ops, Carl Winslow.
Just even with conventional archaeology, the dates keep getting pushed further and further back.
Further and further back.
And this is one of the things, the White Sands, New Mexico stuff that you have on episode 1.
That's right. Which is, by the way, White Sands. Have you been there?
No, I haven't.
What an incredible, ethereal, otherworldly place. And Alamogordo is sitting right in the middle of that. This is where they did the nuclear tests and the Trinitite, which was created there. And there's gypsum sand. It's not normal. It's just the most amazing place. And there, yes, they found human footprints dated back more than 23,000 years.
What do they think that environment was like 22,000 years ago?
Well, it would still have been like that. It would have been gypsum dunes.
Croatia
needs
to give
place.
coastline back.
They wouldn't have left the footprints. I'm not exactly sure why the gypsum is there, but there it is.
Is that the same stuff they use for like gypsum board for construction?
I reckon so, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a very fine, very white sand, and it just goes on forever. And the dunes are sculpted and massive and huge. And we had an amazing time there.
So it looked incredible.
Gosh, I forgot.
So they found footprints
where are they
there,
talking about?
And these are absolutely human footprints, and there's not just a few of them. There's thousands of them.
There's thousands of them. And what's amazing when you actually see the footprints is you can see the interactions between the human beings and animals. You can see that see that somebody is reacting to a giant sloth which has suddenly turned around, and the person who's behind it suddenly turns around as well.
Wow.
There's mammoth footprints overlaying human footprints, and then human footprints overlaying those.
Wow.
And it goes down for meters under the ground. So you have a very deep stratification
21,000
of
to
these
23,000
impressions that have been left behind by our ancestors, and by animals that are now completely extinct. Mammoths and mastodons went extinct during the Younger Dryas, but there are their footprints from 23,000 years ago, side by side with the footprints of human beings. It's very intimate to see a footprint. To see those 5 toes, to see the heel mark.
And I should say, if you haven't watched this episode, I think it's episode 2 of the new season. He goes there with an indigenous woman from there, and it's a very touching moment that they have in there. It's just, dude, like, Graham Hancock is in tune with humanity, with our human nature. And he understands this stuff. I actually sent him an email about this last night. And like, there's more to this than just what's written in books. It's more than that. These are places where people lived their lives and loved each other and had children and grew up. Like, it's okay. We're just going to keep going. I could talk about this forever, but I just want to watch this.
To see sometimes a child walking beside a mother, that's there in the record as well. Wow. It's quite something
exactly,
special.
Javier.
It opens the door. Archaeology has been very reluctant to accept.
This is a problem in our culture in general,
Western culture. It was held for a long time that it was about 13,000 years ago.
And I'm including Latin America.
They've abandoned that now. They did cling on tooth and nail for decades, but that's been abandoned. It's accepted that human beings came here.
It's adorable.
Long before 13,000 years ago. And White Sands is one of the places which provides just absolute, definite, irrefutable evidence of that they were here 23,000 years ago. But we don't know yet how long before that they were here. This is part of the problem. I often remember a site called the Cerruti Mastodon site in San Diego. I went to see the exhibits are in the San Diego Natural History Museum, and I talked with the expert there, Dr. Tom Desmarais, and they are convinced that they are looking at human traces there. It was a butchering of a mastodon, but the way the bones were broken and the marrow was extracted, they don't see any other way that this could have been done except by human beings. And the thing is, it's 130,000 years old, not 23,000 years old, not 13,000 years old, but 130,000 years old. And this opens the possibility that human beings have been in the Americas before they were in Europe. And that becomes...
That's crazy.
That's a door that opens all kinds of possibilities which have been neglected. I think that the prejudice is the prejudice that the Americas were only settled very late in the human story led archaeology to not have their eye on the possibility of what happens if they were here earlier.
Right.
And they tend not to look to that.
Well, what I was going to ask is, as they're digging deeper and deeper
for the
and
soul,
finding
brothers,
these footprints
ancestors,
in White Sands, New Mexico, is there a possibility that they could dig deeper still and find things that are even older?
Yes, absolutely.
How do they know where to go?
Maybe
it was found by accident. The first footprints were found completely by accident, and they were found by indigenous local people who alerted the National Park Service.
We love our indigenous people,
and we have a number of indigenous spokespeople who speak to the White Sands mystery and how it feels for them, the emotional feeling of seeing the footprints of their ancestors from 23,000 years ago. The thing is that the dunes are constantly shifting, and sometimes the footprints will be covered up, and then wind will reveal them again. And they're fragile. They can be easily destroyed and wiped off. And in a way, it's a miracle.
Look, part of, I'm glowing. Part of that is knowing that there's a few things there. One of them is that I'm going to ride that high that he mentions me. I can't wait to hear that. But also, I just love this stuff, man. I've always loved this stuff. Obviously, I mean, this is my channel. This is what I talk about. I love hearing the way Graham talks about it. He pays respect to these places. I felt like watching the first 2 episodes of Ancient Apocalypse Season 2, I just felt like, this human connection. Like, this is about humanity. And it's not, when you're hearing an indigenous person talk about how it feels to see those footprints, that's great for them, obviously, but it's more than that. It's for all humans have this in them, and it's lost on a lot of other people, modern people, and often they're more connected to it, but we all are, and we all can be. But yeah, let's keep going. I'm very happy
that they've survived.
Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
You see how far apart those huge footpads are, and to realize this thing was alive. This thing existed on this planet. Human beings interacted with it. It's a very compelling evidence for an earlier settlement of the Americas.
There is some evidence that human beings came across the Bering Land Bridge.
Oh yeah.
So that probably means there was people already here.
There's
and
multiple
people
waves.
Came here from Asia.
Almost certainly.
Thank you. Glad to have you.
The way the evidence is looking.
Hey, if you're just joining us, because apparently Graham mentions me later in this, I haven't watched all of it, but there's 2 short. Most of what we do here is live streams and interviews. but there's a couple standalone videos on Flint Dibble and his dishonesty that are less than 10 minutes that are on the page that you should check out, especially on maritime archaeology, because this is mostly cultural anthropology, but maritime archaeology is what I know a lot about for archaeology.
It's most likely that South America was settled first, before North America was settled. And that raises all kinds of questions. And we've gone into this in season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse, primarily to do with the DNA evidence of a direct connection between the peoples of New Guinea and Australia and the peoples of certain tribes in South America. And that's very ancient, very old DNA evidence in South America, but also to do with archaeological sites like Monteverde. I did bring up the issue of Tom Dillahay the last time we were on when Flint was here. And Tom Dillahay, who found Monteverde, who excavated Monteverde in South America and realized that it was plus 14,000 years old and therefore a lot older than what was then accepted as the model for the first peoples in North America. When he put that idea forward, he was eviscerated by his colleagues in archaeology. It took them a decade to come around to accepting that actually he was right. And there are many other...
They sent one of his colleagues, an archaeologist, sent a letter to Pinochet, General Pinochet, the dictator of Peru, telling them that Tom Dillahay was a CIA asset, putting Dillahay and his family in mortal danger.
Other sites in South America, going back 30,000+ years. They're all controversial because they conflict with an existing model.
Right.
But I think instead
not
of
Peru. I know that. Sorry. Thank you for the correction.
I think it's one of the problems with archaeology is this territoriality, this kind of control of the past. I think instead of doing that, it would be nicer if archaeology.
This is what I talked about on Bright Insight.
A little bit more open to new and
academia in general does.
Unfortunately, that's just the thing. When
we just had a guy, music PhD down there,
subject, and someone comes along that's also been studying it, but from an untraditional perspective.
Coming, everybody.
Yeah,
people reject that.
I've come to the point, and I'm going to say some strong words here.
Get crazy, Graham Hancock.
I've come to the point where I believe that some archaeologists, not all of them, this problem is with a small number of archaeologists, but
they're very influential. Just so everybody knows, he had on multiple anthropologists, archaeologists on season 1 and also season 2. Many of them. Not everybody is like Flint. We love archaeology here. We just don't love all archaeologists, and we don't trust their word as dogma. Okay, nullius in verba. Nullius in verba. See for yourself.
Extremely vocal. I think what we're looking at is
take no one's word for it. That's what I mean. Same thing.
Archaeologists have a power. They are the official spokespeople for the past, and they use that power to slap down any point of view that doesn't agree with theirs. So I think that there's an abuse of power there, and at the same time, there's not a realization that that's happening, because the mindset that drives it is the feeling that members of the general public are unable to decide things for themselves. This is the arrogance of archaeology, that they feel that they have to tell people what to think about the past, and they underestimate the intelligence of the public and the ability of the public to discern, to make choices between different possibilities about the past. They think that archaeologists seem to think that only one possibility
does not
of the past
have
must be considered
monopoly over the past
by the general public, and that's their possibility. And it reminds me a lot of the heresy hunters back in the 16th century. You know, the people who disagreed with their point of view got burned at the stake. Well, you don't get burned at the stake today, but you can get lynched by a mob of archaeologists.
Well, it's also the same thing that we saw during COVID with medical experts that disagreed with the narrative. It's the same thing.
It is absolutely the same thing.
When you take esteemed professors and doctors and physicians and you cast them into this kook label because they disagree with the narrative that the medical establishment is pushing, and then they turn out to be correct, which most of them did, you see the same patterns. It's just power. It's just power and people that have their identity wrapped up in them being the ones that have access to the actual information.
Yeah.
And they don't want it to be distributed by some guy on Netflix.
That's right. It's
even though you've been probably studying it more than them.
Well,
and certainly studying particular aspects of it.
That's the other thing I noticed, which was the sneering attitude towards me. They talk about my wife Sandra taking tourist photos of the places that we've been to. Well, we've never been anywhere as tourists. We haven't had a holiday for 20 years. But the working trips that we do are very intense.
Your wife's an amazing photographer. Like, who cares if she takes tourist photos? The photos are incredible.
Yes.
They're of real sites that are very pertinent and very interesting.
That's right.
The whole criticizing amazing photographs is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Like, why would you criticize amazing photographs of ruins that are perplexing?
Yeah, I know.
How could you?
But it's
like, how could you? Find
I don't even know what an ogum
even
is.
an area
That
where
sounds
you want
interesting,
people to
though.
agree with you.
It's part of this desperate search.
If you
to
join
say,
the
"We
Discord, bring that
archaeologists
up,
know
and I'll
everything."
take a look at it.
And we must discredit in any way we can anybody who has anything opposite to say.
It's an unfortunate human characteristic that it happens in everything. You see it in martial arts, you see it in science, you see it in everything.
This reliance on experts, I get it. I would like the pilot of my plane to be an expert pilot. I don't want him to be an amateur.
Yeah.
But I don't think that archaeologists and aircraft pilots can be compared in that sense. Archaeology is a much more interpretive discipline. An aircraft pilot is not really interpreting situations that much. He knows what to do in such situations. Archaeologists are interpreting the past, and yet they seem to get very upset by other interpretations of the past that are offered that don't agree with theirs. And this is the problem of expertise in our society. Yes, expertise is very important. It's incredibly useful, but we should not place all our faith and trust in experts.
Right.
We need to liberate our own consciousness and freely think about things and make our own decisions about things and resist absolutely being told what to think.
Well, the problem is
Nullius
these
in verba.
experts are human beings.
Yeah.
And human beings have very distinct behavior
They are not
traits
gods.
that
They are
they
not
exhibit,
arbiters
especially
of
when they're in a
information.
position of power and prestige.
Yeah.
And they like to hold that, and they like to. It feels good for them to be the person that looks down upon the people that don't know better.
Yeah.
And tell them what to do and tell them what to think. And when you're doing that with something like art, look, if you're doing that with something like mathematics, and someone's a mathematical expert, math is a very specific and precise science.
Yeah.
It's very specific.
Yeah.
Archaeology is like, who fucking knows what's out there?
Exactly.
Because you haven't searched everything.
No.
It's not possible to. And as we develop more these fascinating technologies like LiDAR, where you have the ability, ground penetrating radar, all these different things where you can look into the soil itself and find things that aren't visible on the surface.
They just proved with GPR, ground penetrating radar, they just proved that there was a civilization in the Amazon. They found a place which archaeologists estimated houses 70,000 people, straight roads, thousands of years old, in the Ecuadorian Amazon. This is the edge of the Amazon. And you had one conquistador. This is actually brought up in season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse. I've done a thread on it on Twitter as well, months ago. But it's a great thread. Check me out on Twitter. I love writing over there. Oh, Ogham is ancient Irish. Okay, is this like pre-Celtic Irish? I'd love to hear more about that. Completely lost my train of thought. This is what I do. Gosh, obviously you guys can tell I'm super excited right now. I'm super happy for this. I know I keep saying it, but thank you all so much for joining me here. It means so much to me that you guys are here enjoying this with me and listening and sharing your own takes. I learned so much from the comments section. But they found that there was only one conquistador who went down the Amazon River, like very early 1500s, and no one went back there for a long time. And the diseases wiped out. What we know now is the diseases wiped out all these people. So decades later, when they went back there, it just wasn't there. The people weren't there. They were gone. And so they thought that it was a fake forever. And they just proved that there was a large civilization there. And deep in that jungle, man, deep in that jungle, which has anthropomorphic soil, they are going to find so much more. Look, we don't know that he was, just because they found this civilization doesn't mean that he was definitely not lying, but it doesn't look like it's definitely a sham now. And I bet we're going to find so much stuff in there, and I just can't wait for them to do it. But it's very hard to do archaeology there, very hard to get in there. And unfortunately, the logging companies and other companies are right now, to bring up contemporary indigenous issues, are doing some bad stuff in that area, and they're harming people. But regardless, let's keep going.
See them through trees, see them through that we're going to find more, and obviously in Brazil they have done, in the Amazon they have done that.
Well, that was part of our adventure with season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse, was working with a really professional team in Brazil, led by an archaeologist, Marty Parsonen from the University of Helsinki, and a geographer from Brazil, Alceu Ranzi. Alceu, years ago, was the first person who noticed that there are these huge geometrical structures emerging out of the Amazon jungle, and he noticed it on a flight on a commercial aircraft in an area that happened to have been cleared by local farmers for planting crops. That there was this massive geometrical earthwork there, and that. He actually coined the term geoglyphs for these because he compared them in some ways with.
I didn't know about that, Andrew. Welcome
back,
back, man. Really long time
only
viewer.
Visible from the
Glad
air.
to have
you. Suddenly the massive scope and extent of these things, and it's same with the geoglyphs in the Amazon. And here's the thing: the ones we know about up till now we largely know about them because of these tragic clearances of the Amazon rainforest, which is maybe a short-term economic gain, but is a long-term really not a very good idea. But now with LiDAR, it's possible to find these things without damaging any rainforest at all. And we had a LiDAR expert with us. And you can fly LiDAR off a drone now.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a pretty hefty drone, but they can fly anywhere. And we found, I say we, it was actually the LiDAR expert who found. He found, you can see the edge of the rainforest where the clearances stop and the rainforest hasn't yet been interfered with. And then he flies over there, and within a matter of hours, he's found multiple more of these structures, several
that are deep in the rainforest.
Covered completely. And LiDAR allows him to see through the canopy.
It grows very quickly.
And to see what's underneath it without damaging it. And there are these huge earthworks. And this raises the question: how much more is there in the Amazon to find?
He just started talking about this.
Even the archaeologists who are most reluctant are now willing to accept that the Amazon had a huge population before the Spanish conquest.
It's just so wild. That's such a shift.
Millions, cities.
Yeah.
A whole different way of life, a whole different kind of civilization from the one that we have today. One that lived in a man-made garden, which is what the Amazon really and truly is, and lived in harmony.
Yeah, bull worshippers would
interesting
indicate
thing too. We've talked about that before, but for people who've never heard those other podcasts, they've determined that the Amazon rainforest is at least partially man-made.
Definitely. They've determined that because of the preponderance of trees that serve human needs. They call them hyperdominant, and things like Brazil nut trees, which are providing food for human beings, are in massive dominance in relation to trees that aren't useful to human beings. And it's clear that this is the result of a long-term human project to make this jungle serve human needs.
What was the other one? The ice cream bean? What was that?
Ice cream bean, and
they just mentioned that.
I'm forgetting all of the details, but there's
a lot of evidence for it.
Food plants, which are hyperdominant in the Amazon rainforest, and these food plants show that human beings have been nurturing, have been massaging this natural wonder and turning it into something that really serves human needs.
And there's the other thing that you've discussed in depth, the terra preta. This man-made,
is what they're talking about, man-made
rich,
soil,
nutrient-dense soil that they can grow incredible agriculture off of, that we really to this day don't know how they created.
It's a mystery. Again, it was a great privilege to have the opportunity to stand in a pit of terra preta.
No, this is
to get down 15 feet.
Fully confirmed by the scientists. Terra preta. This is an old thing. He talks about it a lot, not modern, but 10 years ago they were talking
indigenous communities in the Amazon are still doing this. They're still doing it, mixing all kind of refuse and waste together and enriching the soil.
That's awesome, Randall. Where do you live, if you don't mind me asking?
Terra preta is still being made, but most of it is very old, and the oldest that they found so far is about 8,000 years old.
So it's just large-scale regenerative agriculture using some old lost method.
Yeah, that's right. And making. See, a rainforest, even when you choose trees that are going to serve human needs, it's not enough. You do need to be able to plant in the rainforest.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Shaman.
That is what
Glad to see you. Love your name.
Has allowed people to do. Rainforest soils are not particularly
Where is JC? I need people in the chat saying, "Oh my God,
fertility all over the Amazon," and we went into that mystery quite a bit in one of the episodes.
It's so interesting, especially when you consider the stories like the lost city of Z, which they turned into an interesting film.
Yeah.
But the book details these records of these incredible cities that these people had visited a long time ago, and then when they tried to go back, there was nothing there.
Yeah.
Because everybody had died off because of European diseases, probably.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. But those cities were just consumed by the jungle.
Yeah, yeah.
And much like Detroit, if you go to Detroit
Click the
now,
like button,
you can
please.
see there's
And also, I'm going to say it again. I got demonetized just because I didn't do an administrative thing that I have to. So if you want to support the show, which I appreciate, not required, all I ask is that you like the video and you comment, you engage. I love that. But if you want to support the show monetarily, Patreon link down below. I really appreciate it. As low as $2 a month.
like there's a bunch of neighborhoods in Detroit that are essentially abandoned, and trees are growing right through the houses. And the houses are, that's just a few decades ago.
Yeah.
And the houses are
JC.
almost gone in some ways. And if you went back 200
Javier,
years ago,
it
there's probably
absolutely
nothing
does.
left of them. And this is probably exactly what happened in the Amazon,
West
except
Virginia,
the trees just
probably
consume the landscape.
Northern Mississippian culture. We've done some stuff. West Virginia, I think, is northern Mississippian culture, or a thing past it. We've done some stuff on this channel. I've had an archaeologist on that's talked about influences of the Mesoamericans and serpents in. There's a thing called the rattlesnake disc. Look out for those on the channel. And the Mayans, I love the Mayans. You guys know I love the Mayans, probably. But yeah, let's go.
Because it's such an incredible, dense rainforest that things grow so quickly there.
That's what happened. I mean, before the Lost City of Z, we have this very interesting report, and I have mentioned it to you before in previous episode.
Ooh, I like that.
The expedition
of still scholarly.
Gaspar de Carvajal and his chronicler Francisco de Orellana, which was an accidental expedition. They were just going hunting in a longboat, but the Amazon took them and wouldn't let them go back. And they traveled 4,000 miles across South America and ended up they started on the Pacific side and ended up in the Atlantic Ocean.
Wow.
And that's in the 1550s, 1560s. And they report seeing enormous, thriving, prosperous cities, highly civilized with advanced arts and crafts. Wow. And they were not believed because 100 years later, when other Spaniards made that voyage and went into the Amazon, they couldn't find the cities. And the reason they couldn't find them is precisely the reason that you give, which is that the jungle had eaten those cities because the human population had been wiped out by disease brought by the Spaniards. The Spaniards didn't have to have direct contact with those indigenous peoples in the middle of the Amazon. The diseases just jumped from population to population and just killed everybody.
It's so wild.
Same thing that happened with
happens.
DeSoto and the
It's so
Mississippi
crazy
River
when
Valley.
most people
Although the
probably
civilization
aren't
was
aware.
already down.
Everyone knows there was a genocide of Native Americans in this country, but most people don't know that 90% of them were wiped out by disease.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Which is just
Yes,
unbelievable.
they're 100%
to think
right.
about. Millions of
Most
people
without
just
ever
wiped
seeing
out
white
over the course
people,
of a few
Europeans.
decades or 100 years by diseases.
Yeah, it's an early example of a biological weapon.
Yeah. Right.
I'm
And
not
to some
familiar with
extent,
Ed Barnhart.
it was
Randall, I
used
want you to reach out to me
deliberately
on
as a
Twitter
biological weapon,
if you don't mind
like those
with what you have. I'd
smallpox-infected
love to see
blankets.
it.
Is that true? The smallpox and
Or
flu?
Discord.
There's a
I've heard
Discord
that
link
was
is down
like
below
a-
in the link
a
space.
rumor or
It
a
may
myth.
it may well be a rumor, but from what I've looked at from the Spanish conquest of Mexico, there was a realization that we can kill these people with smallpox. And
There weren't many intentional cases of that, but
and we have some immunity
there was
to it
some
that they don't have.
And by the way, when I say not many of them, I mean that most of the people, they were annihilated by, and I have to annihilate. I'm only using these words because certain words are not great on YouTube. But most of them were just random. It just happened. And most of them were in the 1500s, very early on. This is actually why English people were able to settle New England and Virginia, because there was empty space. And there's a bunch of stuff on that. I've talked about it before, but this is why it screwed up the entire environment, because the hunter-gatherers even and the horticulturalists, not just the agriculturalists in Central America, they did affect their environment. They did burn selectively forests to create environments for what they hunted. They absolutely did. It didn't seem that way to the European settlers who came there, and that idea has persisted, but they absolutely did. And this created a completely whacked out environment where they were like the fish were flowing in the water like they were the water. The birds blotted out the sun. It was insane if you read these accounts from the early 1600s in New England.
Because we had it forever in Europe.
Yeah.
It's just so terrible when you read Cabeza de Vaca's story about visiting the Maya civilization.
Cahokia and the larger civilization, I think I briefly mentioned this, they went into population decline in the river valley around the time of the Little Ice Age of 1350. And they started building there in about 900 AD. But there are prior mound builders and there were mound builders after that. But the large civilization was, it declined to starting at 1350. But way more people, they passed away later when the diseases came.
And you realize, like, that was, you guys fucking killed everybody.
Yeah, the diseases did. I mean, the battles did kill some people.
Sure. We should probably just make
not
something
on the order of the diseases. Mexico City fell to the Spaniards primarily because of disease, and secondarily because the Aztecs weren't popular with their neighbors. So it really wasn't just Cortez and 400 Spaniards. It was Cortez
Mexico,
and 400 Spaniards
of Central
plus
America,
smallpox, plus the Tlaxcalans.
Tens of thousands of Tlaxcalans.
Used as a sort of farm for human sacrifices for 100 years.
Blood bags like vampires.
And the Tlaxcalans looked at Cortez and they said, we can use this guy.
Yeah.
And so they joined him.
So De Soto, who was the conquistador, less known than Pizarro and Cortez, and also Francisco de Orellana is also less well known. He was the one on the Nile. They are they're less known, but De Soto's, they released pigs and horses, which eventually got picked up by people like the Apache, people who populated the plains, and used without them even meeting Europeans, but they spread diseases, and the animals spread the diseases far and wide in North America, South America, Central America, all over.
He had tens of thousands of Tlaxcalan warriors.
Oh.
Otherwise, he would not have.
Yeah, reach out to me on Twitter, bro.
So,
reach out to me on Twitter.
What archaeology would like is to be in control of expressing that narrative in its fullest form, and I don't think they know.
Seriously, Javier.
I don't think they can.
No.
Did I say the Nile? I meant the Amazon.
Explain that. Explain
the Amazon and the
features,
Mississippi,
those
not the Nile.
It's a very curious thing. And again, the moment we start talking about people's facial features, then they jump in with you're being a racist, you're being a white supremacist or whatever.
Phenotypes are a thing, brother.
Don't serve white supremacism.
Not at all. How would that be racist if these were the most advanced seafaring people alive 6,000 years ago?
Again,
it would be kind of the opposite.
The racism angle is just being used to shut it down.
Right.
This is something that particularly in the climate in the world today.
Well, Flint does that a lot.
Yeah.
He does that. I saw him do that to Jimmy Corsetti online over uses of parentheses or brackets. Did you see that?
I did, yeah.
That somehow or another that's a code for Jews? Yeah. Like, I thought it...
Yeah, look, it is. Jimmy Corsetti didn't know this, okay? He didn't. He told me himself, and he swore on the lives of his soldiers, okay? And he was an army officer. I believe him. He used this one time. Even if he meant it as just a joke, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a joke, dude. But ridiculous.
I thought what he was doing was avoiding. There's certain algorithms that pick up on particular words that you use. Like you ever see that people, they don't like.
This is brand new.
Their post to be more viral. They don't write the word shooter. Mm-hmm. They write SH. And then they put like 2 asterisks and then TERS.
I need to write this stuff down.
So what people are trying to do by blanking out swear words and cutting out different words is that you can.
If you want me to take a look at something, post in the
Discord,
please. Link is down below.
Or limit the distribution of those kind of.
You can still mention it in the chat, but I might forget. Yeah.
So that apparently was all he was trying to do, was adding brackets to something to enhance the algorithm.
To enhance the algorithm.
But it's just like accusing someone of racism. It should be like. It should be very clear what they're saying. There should be it shouldn't be you have decided through some sneaky code to decide that this person's racist. This code means this. This is a commonly used code. Like From what I understand, that those use of brackets is just to trick the algorithm.
So the bracket code thing, like Jimmy didn't know this. I know he didn't know this. I knew this because I've been interested in like the ethnography of like extremist groups. Like I used to go on incel forums and like 4chan sometimes just to check out what they're saying. And when I say 4chan, I mean like poll, like the really bad stuff. But Jimmy didn't know he used it one time. Okay. And even if he did know, it's just a joke. It's like, it's 3 parentheses. Like not a lot of people know that it came from 4chan as far as I know.
Yeah.
Just like the 2 asterisks for shooter.
I think it's very unfortunate that in serious and interesting discussions about the past, that this issue of race immediately gets dumped into it.
Yeah.
Because those who are dumping race into the issue know that that's a way to shut down a conversation. Nobody wants to be
Victor, I
accused of
love
being
your
racist.
profile picture, dude. That's hilarious.
Suggestion, because the most sophisticated ancient civilization that's baffling people to this day is in Africa.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
Those were the most advanced human beings ever. And what we're in disagreement. There's a lot of confusion and debate as to how long ago they were there. According to their hieroglyphs, they were there 30,000 plus years ago. But at the very least, those were people in Africa. Okay, so all the racism shit should be out the window because no one's saying that was anybody else.
No, that was an African civilization.
They literally have images of themselves. We know what they look.
Right.
You know, at least
And they
drawings
weren't
of
all
what they look
like the Egyptians today. They're like white-ish. They're like on the edge of white, but like they didn't used to be. There are certain Nubians who are very black today. They are a mixed race people. Which makes sense because they're on the edge of sub-Saharans, and the sub-Sahara, I should say rather. They're on the edge of that. Like and there were, as far as I know, there were some. This gets expanded by Hoteps, and if anyone knows a Hotep who wants to come on the podcast, I want to have somebody on. But the Nubians made pyramids, not as large, but they made a lot of them. They're very unique, very cool. There were certain Egyptian pharaohs who were almost definitely Nubian or some other type of sub-Saharan, and like that's a thing.
like. We have statues of what they look like. It was an African civilization. They were the
Absolutely,
most advanced
Javier.
people, perhaps ever.
Absolutely.
I'm leaning towards ever.
I'm leaning towards ever too.
Yeah.
Because look, can we think of any other civilization that has survived for 3,000 years?
Right. That
Which
you
is
can go
what-
visit right now.
That you
The
can
Chinese?
go visit right
Tourist
now.
site.
That's pretty much it.
But ancient Egypt, as a culture,
Right.
survived for 3,000 years. It survived the Greek occupation. It survived the previous Persian occupation. It was only the Romans that brought it low. The Roman.
Yeah, I mean, I just
occupation
want to hear
of
what they have to
Egypt
say,
was
man. You
the
know?
beginning of the end.
To
for-
put it
for
into
Egypt.
perspective,
On the
I always
Hotels.
use this quote. I forget who came up with this, but it's a perfect analogy. Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the iPhone than she did to the construction of the pyramids.
Yeah.
Even
Same.
if you
I
use
love
the
that relativity
conventional
thing.
2500
Humanity is about
BC
relativity,
dating,
not
of
about
the
absolutes.
construction of the
So that's
pyramids,
a great way to
which
put
is
it.
also under debate.
It's under debate. Yeah.
Well, it's also, even if that's true, even if it is 2,500 years ago, the most baffling thing is how did they do it? There's no simple answers. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. There's no simple answers. How did they do it? How did they have such incredible sophistication in their construction methods? How did they get those massive 80-plus ton stones 500 miles down from the mountains with no equipment, no heavy machinery? Whatever they did, I think it's reasonable to say that in a different way. I don't think they had iPhones. I don't think they had email, but they were.
Yeah, I've talked about this before. I'm a bit of a Sinophile. I love Chinese history. And yes, the Century of Humiliation, there was tens of millions of lives lost in separate events, many of them.
probably
very
more
unfortunate.
Sophisticated than us today in their ability to manipulate stone and make constructions.
They certainly were, and I think they had mastery of techniques that we don't know about
Right.
yet.
And perhaps equipment.
And perhaps equipment. The Great Pyramid remains to me an abiding mystery, which despite probably 100 or more visits to the Great Pyramid and being inside it and spending the night in it and exploring every passage and every chamber, including the so-called relieving chambers above the King's Chamber, I still can't figure it out. I don't understand how it was possible to do this. And then the
Good
time
question,
span
Axios.
which Egyptology gives
Also,
us. Because
hey, I got to mention this as well. Axios Fitness is our it is our only sponsor. I'm going to drop that link down below. It should already be there, but it might not be. I'll confirm that. Axios Fitness really helped me out. I have some chronic injuries. Personalized fitness training, very important. So please check that out. I have it on there, but it's like through another link. I'm gonna post that in a second. Yeah, and I'll bring that up later in the podcast as well.
Egyptology is fixed on the idea that the Great Pyramid is a tomb, and only a tomb.
And then it was built in about 20 years.
23 years.
Yeah.
Because if it's the tomb of Khufu, then it had to be built in 23 years because that was his reign. Right. He would start, in theory, building it at the beginning of his reign, and it's finished by the end of his reign. That's 23 years. And in the broader span, if you look at the Fourth Dynasty pyramids, and even go back to the end of the Third Dynasty, the Pyramid of Zoser, the Step Pyramid, you find that this is a sudden emergence of incredible skills, which lasts for about 100 years, and then it goes away. It stops. The pyramids that follow the Great Pyramid of Giza, the three...
Yeah, the link, it is down below, actually. Axios Fitness, check them out, guys. Very important. You got to take care of your health. Got to take care of... It helped me out so much with my back issues that I got in the Marine Corps, not from combat or anything, just training injuries. But check them out. And Nicholas, who obviously is also in Axios. So Patreon right now, the only way is to support the show. I can't take donations right now because I'm demonetized. Patreon and Axios down below. Please check out Axios. Consult with our friend over there. He knows what he's talking about. And it's as cheap as $25 a month, which is well worth it for the personalized training.
Pyramids on the Giza Plateau. The pyramids that follow them, the Fifth Dynasty pyramids, are really poor. They're very, very poor quality workmanship. They're falling to pieces. You can hardly recognize from the outside that they're a pyramid at all. When you get inside, you do find wonderful chambers, and you do find what you don't find in any of the great pyramids, which is huge numbers of hieroglyphs and accounts of the person who was supposedly buried in that pyramid.
What do you think of Christopher Dunn's work? Christopher Dunn came on the podcast and he explained his theory that he thinks the Great Pyramid of Giza was some sort of a power plant.
I think it's a theory which deserves to be taken seriously, along with other theories as to what it is.
Flint Dibble is going to say that.
He definitely said it's definitely true and nothing else is bust.
Dishonest.
That is not a satisfactory theory anymore. So we should be open to a number of possibilities. And Chris comes to this from a background of machine tool making. He's a very precise guy. He's an engineer. He understands this kind of thing. And when he looks at particularly at Saqqara, you have this thing called the Serapeum, which is an underground labyrinth. And it's got wide corridors through it, and then off each side are rooms. And in each room are these gigantic basalt boxes, which appear to have held the corpses of bulls. They're like sarcophagi for human beings, but they're on an enormous, gigantic scale, weighing hundreds of tons and cut out of the hardest possible rock, precisely engineered. Everything is
Where is he talking
exact.
About right now?
And it's that, amongst other things, that is attracting Chris's attention to the possibility of a lost technology in ancient Egypt. And then he asked himself the question, well, what was the Great Pyramid if it wasn't a tomb? What might it have been? And he's come
Ghost, I can't wait to hear about that. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Some kind of power plant. And
using chemicals and creating hydrogen and...
Someone else brought it up earlier. I freaked out. I think I almost cried. I did not cry, but I almost did. No one called me out on it.
Step pyramid at Saqqara, which is suggesting that they used hydraulics to lift the big stones up inside there, and that begins to come close to the kind of technology in some ways that Chris is talking about. I think it's worth taking very seriously. I've always had great respect for Chris. I've traveled to Egypt with him, and I think he's done very important work contributing to this, and also looking at the stone vases from ancient Egypt. I remember the first time I was drawn to this mystery, which was...
You gave us one of them. This is a 3D print of
That's
one.
a 3D print of one of those.
Yeah, this is a 3D print of an actual stone vase. Yeah. And it might be like not that exciting to people. Like, oh, what's the big deal? What the big deal is the precision in which this was constructed with handles on it. So it couldn't have been spun on a lathe.
No.
Because it has these two handles that are also cut out of the stone.
Yeah.
And everything is precise to within thousands of a human hair.
Yeah.
Which is bananas.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense given what we are taught.
We're just gonna back
been
it up.
spun on a lathe.
No.
Because it has these two handles that are also cut out of the stone.
Yeah.
And everything is precise to within thousands of a human hair.
Yeah.
Which is bananas.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense given what we are taught was the level of technology of Egypt at that time.
Now, there is some dispute of where these came from. There is some dispute about what is, have these been made in a modern way, and has someone tried to replace,
are we looking at fakes or hoaxes?
Are we looking at hoaxes?
Well, perhaps in some cases we are, but certainly in others, including those in the great museums in Cairo, they've now moved a lot of the content of the Cairo Museum out to a big museum at Giza, and some of it's in transition, but they have thousands of these things.
The thing is, like, even if this was modern technology,
where
we
are
don't
these
know what they
rocks
did.
from, Randall?
We don't know what modern technology
very
exists
cool.
that you could take an incredibly hard piece of stone and cut it into this unbelievably precise little vase with handles on it.
Yeah.
In some bizarre method that we don't know, and hollowed out the inside of it, and some of them with very thin necks, and then a hollowed out inside. Like, how?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Very thin necks, and then this bulbous base to it.
And it's all perfect.
There's another piece,
West Virginia.
It's hard to describe,
That's
but
where
it's
those
got
are from.
it's got a series of 3 flanges that come across. It's like a wheel,
Very cool.
but it's nobody knows what it is, and it's cut out of incredibly hard rock, or cut or shaped in some way. I've never seen a satisfactory explanation for this thing. I wish I could call up a picture, but I don't know.
Do you know what it's called?
I can't remember.
Jamie's a wizard at finding things.
I've written about it.
Why didn't he fact check Flint Dibble?
I bet Jamie's
Sorry,
already found
Jamie.
it.
Love you,
Is
brother.
that it?
Oh no! Yes, top left. That's the one.
That?
When I first saw that in the Cairo Museum, it's cut from schist. This thing
is that?
hard. And when I first saw that in the Cairo Museum, I thought, how on earth did they do this? Why isn't this a big mystery? Why isn't this being seen as a mystery? Because
That looks like a piece of an engine.
it does, doesn't it? It looks like
That looks like something I'd find on my Land Cruiser.
yeah. It looks like part of something else. We're finding a bit of something larger.
Wow, that looks like, to me, like some part of some kind of machine.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that it looks like.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks
If you know, like, automobiles and parts, and you look at something like that, like, oh yeah, that goes probably in there somewhere.
Exactly. And what is its function if it isn't
Right.
something else? It's difficult to see what function it could have, how it could
What
be
is the conventional explanation of what this thing is?
some kind of offering bowl.
Click on that. That article. Oh, okay. The Sabu disc, an ancient Egyptian artifact from the first dynasty, 3000 to 2800 BC, found in 1936 in North. How do you say that? Saqqara.
Saqqara, yeah.
Saqqara necropolis in Mastaba.
Mastaba S311. Those are sort of
make that?
tombs which have got 2 levels.
What an incredible piece!
It is an incredible piece. And
I had never seen that before.
And there it is, First Dynasty. And of course, you can't actually date the object itself. So they're dating it from context. What they're saying is that it was found in a First Dynasty context, but it may have been a legacy even then. It may have been an old object even then. We just don't know that. But it's at least
date it.
exactly. But it's at least that old from the
Toyota.
context.
So it's at least 3,000 years old. They think it was used in
5,000 years old.
Excuse me, 3,000 BC. They think it was used in brewing beer as a mash rake to mix and even out the mixture of grains and hot water in a big mash ton. I don't know what that means.
I don't know either, but I would have thought that if that was your project, you could do it without carving schist into that.
Click on that.
What
thing,
is? Did they say
the
what
mysterious
material?
Egyptian
What did they?
disc?
What is that
It
made
says it
of?
right there. That's it. Can we click on that? Can we go full scale on that so I can see what that looks like? Wow, that's wild.
It does look like a boat part.
That is such a specific shape. Like, if you're going to just use that to make beer, it seems
Yeah,
weird.
that matches
and it's a lot
Man
of
Network.
work to make beer.
Yeah.
You could do
What
it.
they
in
just
other ways.
said.
That looks like some kind of a fan.
Yeah, mixing
to me.
drywall mud. Absolutely.
It looks like
I
something
prefer
that
my
would be on a
powered one.
belt.
Yeah.
You know, like
Love
on
drywall, dude.
some sort
Love
of
working with drywall.
an
Something's
axe.
Gotta
driving
throw
it.
in a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
Looks like a fan.
detergent in
Yeah.
there.
It could be.
It looks like those things underneath it. It looks like that's how you would funnel water or air through.
Yeah. It clearly had a function. Nobody would go to the trouble of creating something as complex and difficult to make as this unless there was a useful function for it.
What is it made out of?
Schist, which is a hard stone.
That's crazy that's made out of stone.
Yeah.
How did you
cut out of one piece of stone?
How did you do that? And how are the measurements of that? Oh, look, it's Giorgio. He says it's aliens. I'm just gonna guess. Is this thing that's cut out of this oops, lost it there for a second. This thing that's cut out of this incredibly hard stone, like, do they have any sort of an or a guess of how someone would cut something like that out of stone?
I've never seen a satisfactory guess. But those like Chris Dunn, who are studying the technology of ancient Egypt, are confident that we're looking at the traces of a lost technology. We don't know how this was done. Like so much else in ancient Egypt, like we don't know how the 70-ton blocks were raised to become the roof of the King's Chamber either in the Great Pyramid. There's so much that we don't know and that's not explained and that is easily written off by
Egypt.
Abusively arrogant experts who say there's no mystery here.
That doesn't look super precise in terms of the radius of it. When you're looking at it, it looks like it looks handmade, doesn't it?
I'm sure it is handmade. The question is how.
Right, but you know what I'm saying? So are these vases, right?
Yeah.
But there's something about it that's like
they discussed Flint at the very beginning.
But it probably didn't
first
have
10
to
minutes.
Be precise.
Yeah.
They might bring him up again. I think they're going to.
Probably just had a spin.
And it survived through at least 5,000 years.
It definitely looks like it was something that spun, right? Because you have that hollowed out piece in the center that you would have an axle on or something like along those lines.
Yeah.
It looks like it's welded in certain spots too, but like how?
Well, how do they weld stone? Apparently they carved that shape out of just one. That's crazy. Now that one looks ultra precise.
This one might have been remade off of the original, maybe.
Click on that.
I would say that's a remake.
Is it? If it's not, it's insane. That's even more insane because that looks so perfect. Why does it look different than the other images?
I don't know.
Well, go back to that one where it's spinning around. Yeah, look at it when it spins around. That looks pretty precise.
Yeah.
They do look like they've recreated. Did they only find one and they've recreated it for museums, or is
no?
He is
there's one original. I've no doubt
he
people have tried to make copies with modern materials, but
we're looking at a few different versions of it.
Yeah.
Well, also you got to think if it is made out of stone, some of the edges have to be beat up just from being in the ground for thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
Nah.
You sure it's not just a different
just looks
lighting?
All beat up like the
right.
It's
it does.
Smooth. The other one was smooth.
Right.
That's
right.
smooth.
That does look like a recreation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think that we're looking at a recreation there.
Okay. Well, whatever it is.
The thing is, where you come to this, there's thousands of objects that defy explanation.
What are those, Jamie? Put that back up. What are those things? Do you know what those are?
It says first wheels.
Oh.
4,000.
Guys, sign up for Axios Fitness.
Wheels, 1500
link
BC,
below.
Basically.
Please. It's really good for you.
That's one of the weirder things about Egypt, right? We don't think they had the wheel.
No, they definitely had the wheel. Whether they had the wheel in the Old Kingdom
right.
Is another question. But certainly by the New Kingdom, by the time of Ramesses, they had wheels, they had chariots.
Yeah. But I mean, the people that built the pyramids.
Bronze Age chariots.
2,500 BC is not... Like, when do they think the wheel was invented?
Well, it's actually not clear to me when the wheel was invented.
Let's see what I thought the conventional guess of
I think I'd given some bad information on this. Somebody brought up that I was not correct in what I was saying.
I believe that's the case.
On the wheel.
One of the things about wheels is you have to ask yourself, in what circumstances, in what places, in what conditions are wheels useful?
Yes.
Not
in Mesoamerica where they don't have
wheel
horses.
Is not a useful thing, in which it's
or
going to
in
get bogged down in the sand.
Peru where they
had
had llamas.
Helpful.
But it's too up and down, not useful.
The use of sleds was certainly part of how ancient Egyptians
It does, but the first time I think was
stones,
with the Yamnaya culture, Indo-Europeans.
The problem is how they then get those stones 300 feet in the air.
I would talk about it more, but I don't want to get too off topic.
Sand on a sled with enough people pulling it. But
how do you get it to the top of the King's Chamber?
How'd you get
I'm just going to leave that there.
That's the
how
problem.
did you fit it? perfectly.
Perfectly. And you know, I've
here.
been up there and I've been in every one of the chambers above it, and each one of them is floored with these 70-ton blocks and is roofed with it.
It's so nuts. It doesn't even seem like 1,000 years more advanced than us. It seems like thousands of years more advanced.
More advanced in a different way. I think this is part of the problem where I've been perhaps misunderstood by Egyptologists when I talk about an advanced civilization. I keep trying to emphasize that we shouldn't look for ourselves in the past, that if we're going to go back 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 years into the past and talk about a civilization, it's not going to be like us. It's going to be very different. It's going to have different priorities, different ways of looking at things. But one of the things that the ancient Egyptians had, which I'm not aware that any other civilization has had, is the ability to sustain essentially a single culture with a single set of spiritual ideas, and to sustain that for 3,000 years, and to keep people happy and fed and well looked after. You know, this is an amazing achievement, amazing stability when you look at it. What our civilization, how old is it really? Can we trace it back to the Romans? Probably not.
Right.
Maybe 500 years, the beginning of mechanization and so on and so forth in our civilization.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
If you
I guess
think
by that
about it,
standard, it doesn't
there's so
really
many
apply to the
mysteries to it.
Chinese,
For anybody to pretend that they have all the answers to something as perplexing as Egypt.
100%.
I think
nuts.
this is an area where I often get criticized, but I think when we look at a civilization and what it is and what it's achieving and why it's so special, when we look at our civilization today, we are fantastic at technology. We are brilliant at science. We can make the best possible machines. And we're a society that is built around production and consumption, and a society in which people
Very
define
materialist.
themselves
Somebody brought this
in
up
terms
earlier.
of what they own, what they possess, and what they produce. And it becomes a very materialistic
I'm not too good on
society,
Egypt.
a society that's focused on material things, where we define ourselves by our material possessions. Ancient Egypt had a totally different focus. Yeah, they were great at making material things, but that was secondary. Their main thing was, what are we here for? Why are we living this life? What happens to us when we die? They investigated that mystery more deeply than any other culture that I know of, and they were doing so right from the beginning.
I actually don't know the difference.
And they were documenting this journey
of jungles
to the
and rainforests.
afterlife.
Absolutely.
In hieroglyphs. And it's like, what were you documenting? Like, how do you know? Like, what were you trying? How did everyone agree on this particular myth or this story?
Unless there was some experience being brought to bear in it. It's one of the things that we point out in season 2 is that the ancient Egyptian notion of a leap to the sky after death, to the Milky Way, of a journey along the Milky Way, of encountering challenges and dangers
Many
and
such
risks
cases.
there, monsters that would block your path, gates that you had to know the password to get through. That idea is found all over the world. The path of souls. It's found all over the Americas. That
What do you think that they're trying to say?
Well, I think first of all, it's evidence of a remote common origin of this idea. It's when it's found amongst cultures all around the world that's apparently had no contact with one another and are often separated by hundreds or thousands of years. The same idea is found about what happens to us after death. The only reasonable explanation I can come up with is that they've all inherited this idea and then developed it in their own ways from a remote common source. And that's one of the main reasons that I'm curious about the possibility of a lost civilization, that these spiritual ideas are found all around the world. And they involve the journey of the soul after death and a leap to the heavens. And sometimes it's called an underworld, but really it's set in the sky. And this journey that takes place where you are judged on what you've done with your life. This is something else that we avoid in the world today, is taking responsibility for our own lives. The ancient Egyptians required you to take responsibility for your life. And if you did not do so, the outcome after death would not be good. You had to celebrate the gift of life. You had to realize the incredible gift that you had been given. And one of the opportunities of that gift is the opportunity to accumulate wisdom. And that's one of the things, hopefully, that we all do as we get older, is get a bit more wisdom and a bit more understanding. But in the case of ancient Egypt, that idea is developed over 3,000 years, and it's essentially the same at the beginning as it is at the end. That the soul, that death is not the end. This is the conclusion of a society that put its best minds at work for 3,000 years on this problem. The death is not the end.
They do not deserve the
Scientists
monopoly
may
they
tell us
claim.
it is. But when a scientist says death is the end, there's nothing more, we're just physical bodies, and when the light goes out, it goes out forever. That's actually not a scientific fact. That's not something that's been investigated or can be investigated.
Consciousness itself is so confusing. Just consciousness. Just like, what is it? Why are we conscious? What is it local, or are we tuning
It's
into
a very
consciousness?
cool fact, Strange Doom.
And when you die, where's that go? Where's that energy go? Is a soul a real thing? Like, what is the essence of life? What is the essence of human life and human consciousness? Those are perplexing questions.
They're very perplexing questions, which actually are of great significance to every one of us. Yeah, I mean, suppose death just is the end, then that's a way not to have to take too much responsibility for our lives, for the impact that we've had on others, for the pain that we may have caused, or for the joy that we may have caused. If death's the end, there's no up or downside to that, whatever we do. But from the ancient Egyptian point of view, death's not the end, and you have been given the precious gift of life. What did you do with it? And there are moral aspects to that question. There's these 42 assessors, they're called the negative assessors, who ask the soul of the deceased questions about what they did in life. And those are all moral questions. They bear some relationship actually to the Ten Commandments. But there's another question, which is called the weighing of words. And that question is, what did you do with the gift we gave you? We gave you the gift of the human life. We gave you the gift of the opportunity to love or to hate. At your choice. We gave you the gift to live in a human body, to have this incredible consciousness, to be able to integrate all kinds of information from all kinds of spheres. What did you do with it? Did you leave the world a better place or a worse place than when you came into it? Did you hurt and damage and cause pain to others consistently out of wicked intent, not accidentally but deliberately causing pain? And there are human beings who do that. For the ancient Egyptians, that kind of behavior meant an introduction to Amit, the eater of the dead. And Amit is displayed in the judgment scene. He's a creature, part hyena, part lion, and he sits there, and certain souls do not go on. Their journey ends, and it ends because of the choices they made during life, and because they never took responsibility for what they did.
Well, it kind of makes sense. A natural selection of the souls.
In a way.
That if there's natural selection of humans and natural selection of animals that allows them to prosper, and to get better and to evolve, it makes sense that would happen with the soul as well. I'm just so confused as to what the environment was like that allowed these people to keep this insane civilization developing and innovating for so long, that they were so more advanced than anyone else that was alive back then that we're aware of, at least as far as like what we've uncovered, what they left behind.
The beautiful art that they made.
Yeah.
The perfection of their geometry, their incredibly advanced astronomy. All of these things are the hallmarks of a very sophisticated, very advanced civilization. Sure, they didn't have iPhones, but
just the sophistication of the symmetry of the facial structure.
Did you? I actually didn't even know that. That's interesting. They only reserved that treatment for their own people in this idea. So what did they think about the afterlife for other people? I don't know. We'll see what
the statues. Yeah, incredible,
beautiful things.
Just
beautiful,
bizarrely technologically advanced.
Yeah,
bizarrely. Yeah, because to perform something like that, you need incredible tools of measurement. Enormous statues that have faces that are absolutely perfectly symmetrical.
Yeah,
how did you do that?
Yeah.
How'd you stand that up?
Well, the answer is we
don't know.
We don't know. There's so much that we don't know, and it's that attitude towards the past which I think would be more helpful. Is
an
that
entirely materialist worldview, just like late stage capitalism.
Mysterious background to we human beings. As you said earlier, anatomically modern humans, we think that they first appeared about 300,000 years ago. Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, 310,000 years ago. Now, I can remember a time not so long ago, back in the 1990s, when it was thought that the first anatomically modern humans were as recent as 50,000 years ago. And then they shifted it, new finds were made to 110,000 years ago, now 310,000 years ago. We don't really know how far into the past that goes. And we don't know about the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, who were also human beings. Certainly they were human, the same species as us, because they could interbreed with us.
Well, even before that, like Homo habilis, human refers to a lot more.
And that's one of the reasons why I have a problem with the notion that civilization just emerges 6,000 years ago, because we had the same kit, the same wiring, the same brains for at least 300,000 years, and we weren't doing any of this stuff, apparently. I suspect we were, but it's not made the record.
Well, it seems that what they were dealing with in terms of the resources in the Nile Valley was unbelievably bountiful.
It was bountiful.
And that's probably one of the reasons, before the climate shifted and changed and it became a lot of desert. Before that, it was probably incredibly bountiful, and that allowed them to stay there for a long period of time and not have to worry about food.
I don't know a lot about it, but
the bounty, however, goes back much further.
On everything.
This is one of the reasons why I kept on trying to talk about the Sahara during the debate. This vast area, which frankly has not been studied properly by archaeology at all. Hardly a fraction of it has been studied. This vast area, I'm often accused of creating what they call a God of the gaps argument. I'm saying you haven't looked enough in the Sahara. You haven't looked enough in the submerged continental shelves. You haven't looked enough in the Amazon rainforest. And the argument is that I'm trying to put my lost civilization into these gaps. But these are very special gaps. The submerged continental shelves were prime real estate during the Ice Age. That was the place to be, just as it is today, to be near coastlines. The Amazon rainforest was a bountiful place, and the Sahara Desert was green and rich for thousands of years.
And they have not done as much as Flint Dibble claims. He lied about that.
It was the kind of place
in the Guardian
where
article.
A civilization might well have emerged.
One of the Gardner articles.
Whale bones, yeah.
Whales.
Yeah.
So anybody who doesn't think there's a mystery in the Sahara Desert,
yeah,
and anybody who really tries to dismiss the notion that most of it hasn't been really excavated.
It's free real estate.
Really hasn't been.
No, it hasn't. It's
too vast.
It's too vast, and it's too expensive to excavate.
And the excavation, you would have to...
It's as large as the continental United States, bigger than the continental U.S.
How many people even live there?
Nobody knows, because it's not been investigated properly. It's a desert. And it's had relatively little attention. We do know there's some amazing rock art from the Upper Paleolithic in Tassili in Algeria, in the Sahara, but not enough has been done. This is the problem for me with saying archaeology's basically got the story of the human past nailed down, is that there's huge areas which have not been investigated. And I reject the idea that that is a God of the gaps argument, because that's not why I'm proposing there was a lost civilization. And that's all I'm doing. I'm not insisting, I'm not demanding that people believe me. I just want to inject this idea into the discussion so that it can be considered. When
I think they know pretty much when it was. I don't know when Santorini erupted, but I think
asked me
after.
During the debate, is there any evidence for your lost civilization in what they've found? And I said, in what they've found, no. And then I went on to say,
Very important.
But that brings us to the point of what they've looked for.
Flint misrepresented this. Very dishonest.
What they've not found. That has been taken again and again as me saying that there's no evidence for my lost civilization. Whereas what I'm actually saying is there's no evidence in what archaeologists have studied for a lost civilization.
And they have not studied Unit 4 of Gunung Padang. They have not ground-proofed it. How old is Flint? I don't know. I tried to kind of figure it out. Based on his graduation. He's younger than Graham, much younger. I think he's in his 30s or 40s. If he's in his 30s, he does not look great for his age, but I think 40s.
Because I'm not studying what archaeologists study. I am very happy to use material from archaeologists, and I could not do what I do if I didn't use material from archaeologists. It's a very important basis to my work. However, it's the astronomy, it's the astronomical alignments, it's the precision, it's the precision of the pyramid.
We've had an archaeoastronomer on the podcast, Cam McConnell, and that is evidence. It's not archaeological evidence, but it's evidence. And Flint cannot think outside of his single track mind of archaeology, and he seems to believe that archaeology has a monopoly over this information, and he does not. Archaeology does not.
It's the myths of a global flood all around the world. It's a universal story of a massive cataclysm with a few survivors who bring their knowledge to others. This is one of the reasons why I think the Atlantis story, which Flint Dibble is so opposed to, deserves to be taken seriously, because it's part of a global tradition. It's yet another flood myth, in fact.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes I don't think too much about the comments because I'm trying to pay attention to so many things at once. He was a very proficient lumberjack. Yes, he got wood out of the sand. I see it now. It's a good joke. My bad.
Those 150 or 200 other flood traditions that come from around the world. And it's not enough for archaeologists to say, oh, people experienced a little local river flood, or there was a tidal wave that day, and so they decided that the whole world was submerged with water. That doesn't satisfy me at all. The fact that this is found all around the world, to me, is a memory of something that happened to our ancestors, something so traumatic, something so huge that it's been preserved better than almost anything else from our past.
What is your take on the Reichart structure? Am I saying it right? Reichart structure,
Mauritania. I would not like to say one way or the other because I've not been there. I've not had boots on the ground there. I've not been able to look at it. Yes, it's very intriguing.
Right, you can't really look at it. It's way too big.
Also, the salt all around it.
Yeah.
Where it shows that at one point in time it was probably submerged, like something happened.
Probably was, but you might have to go back many millions of years to get to that point. The honest answer to that question is I don't know. I'm open-minded on the Reichart structure. It's something that I would like to study, but I have not had time to yet. In future work, it's something that I may study, and after studying it, I may come to the conclusion that it's just a remarkable natural phenomenon, of which there are many, or I may come to a different conclusion. It depends what the evidence shows me, but I try not to spout off on things that I'm not personally acquainted with and don't really know about.
Well, good for you. I like to spout off. It's also like there's so many of those things that people thought were myth, like Troy.
Ooh, I actually don't know, Carl. Anyone else know about Death Valley?
Turns out to be a real place. I think the myths are the memory banks of our species, and I don't think archaeology takes them seriously enough.
Myths
There's
are
a tendency
the memory
to
bank.
just dismiss them as fantasies
of our species.
as things that were made up by the ancients for some bizarre reason of their own. But they're the memories we have from the time before writing, from the time before documents were kept, and they're a precious resource in understanding our past. So it's things like that, and then at the end of the day, to twist what I said, that in what archaeologists have studied, there's no evidence for my lost civilization, is completely wrong, because I've written thousands of pages of books. This is one of the issues. Like in that debate, I was supposed to prove everything about a lost civilization. I didn't even come here to prove it. I came here to explain why I'm interested in it and why I want to share my interest.
And he's allowed to just talk about speculation. He's allowed to bring up different theories, even some that contradict each other.
But if I'm asked to prove it, I would say don't refer to what I managed to say during a 3-hour debate. I'd say refer to the 8 or so major books that I've written with thousands of pages and thousands of documented footnotes. That's where my argument is in place. And you'll find that argument is not based on what archaeologists have studied. It's based precisely on what they've not studied about the past.
Well, regardless of the argument that Flint tried to put forth, that there's no evidence of what you're saying,
the nature is
exaggeration
healing.
Of the shipwrecks, the stuff about seeds. The fact is, this resonates with a lot of people. This mystery is perplexing. It's confusing, and there's a lot of it out there. It's not like one site like Egypt There's a ton of sites.
Yeah.
The Sage Wall in Montana. What do you think of that thing?
Again, I will withhold judgment until I have my boots on the ground there and have a look at it. And even then, that might not be enough. I do know that the property owners there are doing a lot of ground penetrating radar, and there may be results from that. But at the moment, I would not say that's definitely a man-made structure, nor would I say that's definitely a natural structure. I would say that's an intriguing structure, but it is in a geological context where other things like that are found. If I were asked to put money on it,
There it is.
yeah.
Boy, that looks.
I mean, it really
man-made.
is hard. It is hard to resist the conclusion.
I mean, it's super hard to resist the idea that that's man-made, and especially if it goes deeper under the ground. And they think it does. They think it goes.
Oh,
as
it
deep
does.
as-
It goes deeper. That's what the ground penetrating radar
How far?
is about 30 feet.
30 feet.
In fact, I was
That
yesterday.
looks so man-made.
Yeah, it really does. When I look at that photograph, to me, that is a man-made structure. But I realize now, in the environment in which I live, surrounded.
We'll back that up
but
so we can see it.
when I look at that photograph, to me, that is a man-made structure.
Pretty small, but it's all right.
I realize
briefly touch
now,
on
in
it.
the environment in which I live, surrounded by archaeologists who are extremely hostile to my work,
Right.
that I better. It's not in my interests to leap to a conclusion about anything.
Of course.
Before I've studied it, and I do intend to go to Sage Wall. I was yesterday with Michael Collins, who's the guy who's done a lot of the videography on Sage Wall. He doesn't know whether it's natural or man-made either. More work needs to be done, but it's an intriguing issue, and it may be part of the lost history of the Americas. We just don't know yet.
And what's crazy is if that is, how old is that thing?
How old is it? Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? And if you're talking about footprints of people that lived
Oh, they're talking about the
22,000
ritual
years ago,
structure.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, what were they making things? Like, what
Yeah.
was going on? Did they build something like that?
Yeah. Or even earlier.
Right.
Is
or
it,
even earlier.
is it
which
part of
crazy.
the lost story of the Americas? There's so much that's been lost, particularly in North America, with the massive destruction that took place during the 19th and 18th and early 20th century. It's reckoned that there were 1 million mound sites in North America. If you go back to 1500, there's about 100,000 left, which is a lot actually, but most of them are massively destroyed, and the other 900,000 have gone, just plowed under, turned into farmland. And how much else of the prehistory of North America has been lost as a result of a process where first of all there was a conviction that the indigenous inhabitants had only been here for a very short time, whereas we now know they've been here for a very long time, and secondly, there was a propagandistic desire not to give too much credit to them. So let's get rid of some of their stuff.
Wow.
I was very disappointed when we were shooting season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse that we were not allowed by the
Disgusting.
authorities to film
Truly
in
disgusting.
Cahokia, which is one of the great mounds that still survive.
Yeah, it really shows how they how they are willing to have their ideas questioned by the fact that they refuse to let him even study the places. I mean, it's awful. It's awful. These are locations that are part of our shared human history. They should be shared by all, and I am absolutely disgusted by that.
Because they've been told that I'm a pseudo-archaeologist and that I'm going to mislead the public if I go there. So the best way is just to stop me going there. We tried to film in Moundville in Alabama as well. And again, we were denied permission to film there. There's no doubt that
wrong.
archaeology has
It's
joined
wrong.
ranks to do their best to prevent me doing what I do.
That's so awful to deny anyone the ability to, especially we're going to put something like this on Netflix where millions of people are going to see it. Deny people the
Disgusting.
just the access through video
Bastards
of
is right.
experiencing
Yeah.
this site and the mystery that's attached to it. Like, who are these people?
Yeah.
Why did they build this? What artifacts haven't been discovered
Yeah.
that are inside of this
Yeah.
thing?
And, here's what archeologists say. Here's an alternative point of view.
Yeah.
You're an
No,
intelligent
you're not
member of
allowed
the
to have
public.
alternative
Make up
point
your
of
own
views.
mind.
You're being
We're the
reasonable. That's
arbiters of
outrageous.
truth.
It's a most unfortunate thing.
Yeah, I've been to Cahokia.
It's
Very, very
it's
cool.
not
Very
unfortunate
cool.
that there's a lot of people that are interested in it, though.
More and
that's-
more.
yeah.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. I do see it as an extension of our interest in our own genetic origins, for example, a lot of people, I haven't done it yet, but I'm kind of keen to do 23andMe or whatever it's called.
I wouldn't do it.
No.
Not now. No, they sell all your data away.
They'll sell your data.
Now someone's going to know your exact DNA.
They can have it.
Yeah.
The whole thing's nuts. Like, I didn't know that they could do that, but apparently they have. Not only that, databases get breached and they find your information.
My eldest son, who is half Somali and half English.
I thought his mom was
DNA.
His wife was Bangladeshi.
And he found what it showed was that he's 50% African and 49% British and 1% Spanish.
Oh.
And we tried to figure that out. And the answer is that my ancestors came from Cornwall in the southwest of England.
Oh.
And that's where
Graham, bad screw up. Graham is a Celt. Absolutely. He's a Celt. Thank God. Oh my gosh. He's one of us, or one of me.
the Spanish Armada washed up. And the survivors of the Spanish Armada washed up and then integrated with the local community and contributed their genes. So, you know, there is an interest in the past. There's an interest in our personal past, our personal origins, our ancestors, who we are, and there's a much broader interest in the story of humanity that has brought us to where we are today. And this haunting feeling that something's missing and that we have a civilization today. I often would like to compare it to a sort of furious, in terms of the level of consciousness, our civilization today is like a furious, petulant teenager. But in terms of what it can do, in terms of the destructive power of nuclear weapons, it's a god. So we have godlike powers with the consciousness of an immature teenager. Yes. That's what we're looking at in the world today. And maybe by understanding our past better, by understanding our unity that comes down from the past, maybe we can learn something that would be helpful to us in not carrying on in this way, because we do live at an inflection point just now.
We're allowed to study it.
This is one thing I'm pretty sure that quote unquote my
I don't
civilization
know. I think the Sea Peoples was a multi-ethnic
we have nukes
thing
today, and we
with
have
what I know about them.
An enormous scale. And behind each of
Heard a lot
those
of
nukes
theories,
is a fragile human being with his own or her own ego and complexes and fears and paranoia.
Yeah.
And we're reaching a point where those buttons are going to be pressed. We are, as far as I know, the first human civilization that has the capacity to actually wipe itself out completely. We don't need a comet impact. We don't need a solar outburst. We can do it to ourselves.
Solar
and that
outburst.
requires humanity to make a major step forward in consciousness. And I think making that major step forward in consciousness will be helped by better understanding our own past.
What's up, Meta? Good to see you, brother.
It's just disturbing how many times
Great Twitter
we
account
can
to check
travel
out,
to ancient
Meta
places
Prime.
like Greece or any place where you go to Rome and realize, oh, there's a thriving civilization here at one point. And
you were in Greece
now it's
recently.
gone. Yeah, with Brian.
You went with Brian
Murarescu.
Murarescu. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Brilliant
Amazing.
guy.
Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
But what a treat it is to have a tour of the Parthenon, the Acropolis, with him.
Yeah.
And, you know, we went to see the site of the Eleusinian Mysteries and all that. It was very, very, very interesting, but just also sobering, because you realize, like, this civilization did not make it. You know, this insane, fascinating, complex civilization crumbled.
Yeah.
And the idea that ours can't is one that we kind of hold dear. Like, we're different. We got to figure it out. We're better.
Hubris.
But there's so much evidence that that's just a normal pattern of human history.
Civilizations come and go.
Yeah.
We could be gone in 20 years.
Yeah.
We could be gone in
I'd love to
3 days.
take you on a trip to Egypt.
I want to go. I'll tell you about an idea that was brought to me after the show. I can't talk about it now.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
I've made friends with Zahi Hawass.
I heard.
He's a very
You guys
interesting
are homies
man.
now.
Yeah, we're homies. We had a nice dinner
Good.
together.
I'm
and
so glad.
it's
Zahi
partly
Hawass
because
is a Egyptologist
who needs more
had a public
enemies
spat
and
with
hatred
Graham.
in this world.
Exactly.
And I said some very cruel and harsh things to Zahi in the past, and I felt
I'm glad
the
he
time
can
had come
recognize
to
that. I didn't know he
apologize
did
for
that.
those. So I went to Egypt to apologize to him.
Really?
And we had a fantastic dinner together. His son joined us. Santa was there. It was very friendly and very positive.
I love stories like that.
And, you know, we've agreed
Me
that
too.
we will, if by chance we get a season 3 of Ancient Apocalypse,
Yeah,
which
they
we may
will.
or may not get. I'm not in control of commissioning decisions at Netflix, but if we get a season 3 of Ancient Apocalypse, I would like it to be entirely on Egypt. And what I would like is for Zahid to confront me on every point as we go through Egypt. Whatever one says about Zahid's explosive personality, he's been immersed in ancient Egyptian Egyptology for his whole life. And he has very strong points of view on it. And he's a fun guy in some ways.
I'd imagine
I think
that
Egyptians
as people
would
get older and
argue they're
wiser
not Arab.
and realize the folly of their ways, particularly in their youth. Maybe
You
he
got
would
any
be
Egyptians
more
in the
open
chat
to the
can
idea
speak on
that
that?
the civilization is just this civilization,
I love having
same
the
civilization,
diversity.
but older than you think it is.
Yeah, I'm hoping to persuade him
Yeah.
of that. I think it'll be an interesting dialogue if we get to have it.
I think people for a long time had this concept in their mind that changing the dates somehow negates the accomplishment of the people that lived in the prescribed date.
Where'd they get that idea?
You know, that somehow or another.
The pushing it back.
Yes, the pushing it back somehow or another, and they'll even say it's racist.
This is a propaganda. This is propaganda. This is
Oh, they do?
archaeological propaganda.
Okay, you're Turkish.
That's been
close
said to me
enough to know.
repeatedly, but I'm suggesting
yeah,
that
Berbers don't,
all the
though.
achievements of certain indigenous
Didn't know that. So
cultures
that's like
around the world
Morocco,
should actually be handed to
Tunisia.
a lost civilization. That ideas were brought to
I think.
them.
Correct
Yet,
me if I'm wrong.
weirdly, those same archaeologists recognize
okay to
that
disagree here.
agriculture was introduced
Flint
to
Dibble.
Europe by emigrants from precisely the Göbekli Tepe area. That's where agriculture wasn't present in Europe until 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. It was
Yes, he
brought
is very
in by the
emotional. I don't blame him
people.
for that.
This is part of the human nature that we share ideas.
Sure.
Somebody has a great idea. We look at that. We think we'd like a bit of that too. Teach me how to.
Yeah,
do
I'm
it.
not. I wasn't.
And
I
this
wasn't
happens
implying, or I
all
wasn't
the
trying
time,
to
and it doesn't
imply
mean
that.
the person who's being taught is any less than the person who's doing the teaching. The person who's being taught
does.
may have things to teach them.
I should just say I very much respect Zahi Hawass for being willing to make amends on it, and something that, look, even Flint Dibble, man, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If Flint Dibble apologizes, changes his tune, all will be forgiven, and I won't mention it ever again. It is that there is a road for that. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening. It's not like Zahi Hawass, who I think is a person who got emotional at a certain thing and reacted in a way that he is not proud of. And Graham admitted just now that he feels the same way about his own actions. And I respect that. I respect that a lot. And if Flint Dibble does that, which I don't expect him to, but if he does, all will be forgiven and it'll be fine.
Themselves. I've always felt that if there was a lost civilization at all, and I believe there was, but I can't absolutely prove it, I think we're looking at a terrible cataclysm. Part of it happened near Göbekli Tepe. Abu Huraira in Syria was hit by one of those airbursts, absolutely incinerated at that time. A terrible cataclysm with relatively few survivors, and that those survivors,
He does have more
just
weight
as
on
we
his
would do
belly,
today,
Carl.
took refuge amongst people who'd made it through the disaster better.
Talking about
And those
Zahi Hawass.
those people who'd made it through would most likely have been hunter-gatherers, because hunter-gatherers are so resilient and so able to survive disasters, whereas people in a quote-unquote civilized condition are often not. I mean, we can see I understand that the hurricanes that are happening in the U.S. at the moment are horrific natural events, which are killing people. But we're talking about something on a scale vastly larger than that, and it's difficult for me to see. We find it hard enough to make it through a hurricane. I find it difficult to see how we could make it through another Younger Dryas impact event, or how we could make it through a man-made cataclysm as a result of nuclear war, which is, I suspect and I fear, is much closer than we think. I hate the idea that nuclear missiles may be flying
We are
in my
anti-war here,
lifetime or the lifetime
libertarian
of my
rooted.
children. But I have to say, honestly, it's a possibility with the state of the world at the moment and the low state of
Our
consciousness
leaders,
of the people who lead us. The
very
leaders and
irresponsible.
governments are behind this. It's not human beings, individual people who are behind this hatred in the world today. It's leaders and governments who are mobilizing that hatred to serve their own
Absolutely.
interests. And it's very dangerous. If we didn't have nukes, it would be less dangerous.
But yeah, I agree with you. When you're talking about Göbekli Tepe, one of the
Nukes
things
do
that
help to
Jimmy
prevent
Corsetti has
less
talked about
dangerous
recently in his
things,
YouTube
though.
show is that they have stopped excavation and they've planted
slowed
trees
excavation
above some of the areas.
Those were already
which is
planted in the
very
60s.
strange.
It is. Yeah.
They
And
shouldn't be there.
They want the excavation.
And archaeologists will
to resume
make
in
excuses about it, but it is
150
not
years?
Yes.
excusable.
So, what would be a logical reason to not excavate these fascinating ancient sites that are at least 11,000 years old?
Generally, with any archaeological site, they don't excavate more than 5% of it, and often less than 2% of it.
Is that because of funds?
It's often because of funds, but it's also because of the feeling that as technology improves, more may be learnt from these sites in
You
the
have
future.
to have
And
an
that's a
idea
reasonable
about
argument.
that, though.
Because
Like
excavation
what that
is
would
destruction.
be. I don't think
To a certain
anyone's
extent,
brought up
excavation
specifics.
destroys what's being
Right.
excavated.
And he's right. He's not. This is a thing in archaeology. Archaeology is inherently destructive. You destroy the site as you excavate it. You do it 10 centimeters at a time in a 1 meter. In general, I should say. Sometimes there's other methods, but in general, if you're excavating a site 10 centimeters down at a time, it takes a long time to do it. And it's destructive as you're taking the artifacts out of the ground and you're studying the features which are left by stakes and things like that. It depends. Everything I'm talking about is from my context of my experience with archaeology, which is of Eastern Algonquin people of the Northeast, as well as a little bit of historic period Europeans. But it is inherently destructive. This is a thing.
And therefore, when you interfere with a site and start excavating it, you may be destroying materials that in 100 years, technology would be able to interpret in a completely different way. I mean, go back 100 years from where we are at present, and you didn't have carbon dating, you didn't have LiDAR, you didn't have all
LiDAR
kinds
is
of
for
methods
surveying,
of
not excavating, but
dating
yeah.
objects, luminescence, the luminescence from rocks is another way of dating. We didn't have any of those technologies.
That's an
We do
older
have them
dating
now.
version.
So I think the speculation
They still
is
do it,
100
but
years
it's
in
not
the
as good as
future,
radiocarbon.
archaeologists may have technologies that would be able
It's
to
not as
extract
accurate
more
either.
information than this. That's the case that's made. I get it. But I think Göbekli Tepe is such an important site. And I know for sure, because I spent 3 days with Klaus Schmidt, who was the original excavator of Göbekli Tepe, that underneath that place there are dozens of huge unexcavated stone circles with enormous megalithic pillars in them, all under the ground, waiting to be excavated. And the decision appears to have been made not to excavate them. And I do find that slightly suspicious. I do find it odd. I think the site has got such an important role. It's such an iconic site that to just stop the excavation or to only continue it in a very small way isn't satisfactory to
When you
what's happening.
say suspicious, like what
Yes,
would be...
you're in the Central European time, Yolanda. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so nice to have you in here. Yeah, thanks for coming, and enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy Hungary. I'm glad you're living there. It's a beautiful country.
be the motivation for discontinuing that kind of excavation other than the fear of destroying things?
I don't want to be a
what's he gonna say
conspiracy
here?
theorist.
Please do.
Please do. This is the
But-
Joe Rogan
but there is
Experience, brother.
There is an issue here. I've noticed that it isn't just attacks on me that certain archaeologists are making. It's also attacks on other specialists. For example, Dani Hilman Natawajaya, who
Right.
is the geologist who brought to the world's attention the mystery of Gunung Padang in Indonesia.
Flint lied about this. Also, he oh gosh, I think he lied about that. I'm trying to remember. There was something very wrong with one of the things that he said about this. It was surveyed. It's fine if I remember. I'll bring it
which
up.
appeared in the first episode of season 1 of Ancient Apocalypse. The possibility that this site is more than 27,000 years old, that we're looking at a pyramidal structure that has had several phases of work done on it, and that the earliest phases go back deep into the last ice age. He managed to publish a peer-reviewed paper on this, but unfortunately for Danny, he'd appeared on my show. And that led archaeologists to dive in on him, and there was a
Right.
ganging up of archaeologists, and complaints were made.
Oh, that's what Flint lied about. Flint lied about there being no voids at Gunung Padang, but there was a void. It was identified by Danny Hillman. And I actually have an old live stream where I completely threw out the idea of Gunung Padang, but I was doing it based on a bad information. I did not look at a certain thing. I was using I was viewing a draft as well. So the formatting of it was not the last paper. I can't even find the paper I was looking at, but regardless, Flint claimed in a thread that there were no voids at Gunung Padang, but there is a void identified very clearly by Danny Hillman at this site. And the void this is from the survey. You need to ground truth it, which Flint was correct about, but Flint then also lied, or this one's misleading to the point of lying, where Flint Dibble is talking about Gunung Padang and saying that all of these sites have been excavated by archaeologists. Okay, all the sites he studied have been excavated, but certain points, and with Gunung Padang, they did not excavate the most important part. They did not excavate Unit 4, so they don't know. They don't know, and that's the one that is the area of discussion, the area of disagreement. It's so dishonest. It's very disappointing.
Made to the peer-reviewed journal that published it, and finally they retracted. They retracted his paper.
Yes, I think there's 3
reasons.
of them.
I've got a major article by Danny on my website.
The paper showed
what
one very clear one of it.
It's like
a shaft.
We don't want too much attention brought to this. Let's crush it. Let's crush it right now. The same thing is happening with the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. An enormous amount of attacks are being made on that hypothesis, rather than considering it as an interesting explanation for the cataclysms at the end of the Ice Age. A lot of people are just focused on trying to destroy it in every way possible.
The big thing about this, to me, is that you have to explain the megafauna extinction. When I was younger, because even though the Clovis first hypothesis was even in mainstream archaeology in the 90s, it was shown to be not true, and archaeologists did not believe in Clovis first, this idea of humans about 13,000 years ago being in North America, in the Americas in general. That explains the megafauna extinction. If humans just arrived with relatively advanced technology, and when I say that, I'm talking about like bows and arrows and atlatls. I'm not talking about like M240s or something. That would explain the megafauna. They come in and the animals had not evolved around humans. They had no natural defenses from evolving around humans, and they were hunted to extinction. But that's not what happened. So what we're supposed to believe then is that this megafauna extinction, which they can't explain, they don't know why it happened, and they just, you have to explain the megafauna extinction. And oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. In order to understand why all of the large megafauna in North America, and yes, in North America, went extinct at this time, you then have to establish why that happened. And this is around the time of the Younger Dryas that this at least starts. And to me, the megafauna extinction is the greatest evidence, as well as a lowering in the human populations at this time. I believe that's true, but that explains the megafauna extinction, and I haven't seen any other explanations for it. And a question. We have a question that I want to see. Do you plan to make videos in the future about Dibble? Also, would you be open to debating him? I would debate him. I'm not even thinking about that as a possibility, just because he won't do it. He doesn't want to talk to me, which is fine. I don't really want to talk to him either, but I would. I find him just slimy. I don't want to talk to him. I would talk to a lot of people. I would talk to Flint if he wanted to. Not going to happen. But videos on Flint, I will have one out soon. I'm going to put it out when I'm monetized. I'm going back to the very beginning, and I'm going back to a thread that Flint posted about Graham Hancock a very, very long time ago. And I have it written. I just have to record it and post it, and I'm going to do it again when I'm monetized, which is a good time to bring up again that I am, that if you want to support the show right now, Patreon below, and also Axios Fitness, who is our sponsor, who also just commented. Everybody should do it. Like $25 $25 a month, I think $50 activation for the lowest thing. He provides a number of different things. It's been very useful for me. I've been slacking on it recently, as I have, which is very obvious to me. I really need to get on it, but that's my own fault. Please sign up with Axios Fitness. Take control and be in a community with me and the Prudentialist and other people. And he's a great guy who runs it. I don't know if his name is public, so I won't share it, but absolutely great. It's been so helpful for me as somebody who has chronic injuries. But even if you don't, it's incredibly important.
I can't help wondering. Maybe there's some truth, deep truth to this, that there was a cataclysm, that there was an ancient apocalypse, something really horrific that happened. Maybe it's a cyclical disaster. Maybe it's coming round again. This is something that would lead any government to want to avoid panic. To suppress, to cover up these issues. So that would be the conspiracy theory on it. I'm not saying I buy it, but I'm saying that it's possible.
Would also a conspiracy be that they'd recognize that some of the area around Göbekli Tepe was older still, and they decided the archaeologists didn't want to confront it, and they put a stop to it?
That's also possible. That's also possible.
They haven't excavated
in
Unit
their
4.
favor, and to their credit, the excavation of that whole area around, not Göbekli Tepe itself, but other neighboring sites. Karahan Tepe is the best known. Turkish archaeologists, it's interesting, are calling this now a civilization. They're calling it the Tas Tepeler civilization, the Stone Hills civilization. And they're finding that the same iconography...
We have our Turkish friend in the chat still, right?
Not quite on the scale of Göbekli Tepe.
What do you think about this?
Repeated all across the region. They extend all the way down to the south of the Jordan Valley, to Jericho. The ancient site of Jericho is part of that lost or emerging civilization that appeared at the end of the Younger Dryas. Cyprus is another example I was mentioning about how it was settled in what appear to have been planned, organized settlement events near the end of the last ice age. Again, you find that same iconography that you find at Göbekli Tepe turning up there.
Which
as well.
iconography specifically?
The tendency to use T-shaped pillars, to use certain designs like a V-shaped necklace, this kind of iconography, and the structures, these circular structures, semi-subterranean structures that are so characteristic of Göbekli Tepe. They're found there as well. They're found all across the region. Jericho in the Jordan Valley is absolutely intriguing. There's a massive tower there, which again dates back right to the end of the last ice age. A huge megalithic tower with the world's oldest known megalithic stairway that runs up inside it. So what's emerging as a result, if Göbekli Tepe hadn't been found, none of this would have happened. But it's led to a widespread interest in the whole area. So while excavation may have stopped at Göbekli Tepe or may have slowed down, it is continuing elsewhere across the region. And to be fair to archaeologists, we need to recognize that.
Is the size and scale
Very
of Göbekli Tepe unique in comparison to the ones that are around it?
Yes. So far, the ones that have been found, Göbekli Tepe is unique, and I think it's clear now that
it's likely
Göbekli Tepe itself was the end of
use.
a process, not the beginning of a process. It was something that marked. It was a marker. It was something that brought together the best of everything that they'd accumulated and created it in one place, and left it there, finally at the end, burying it, sealing it as a time capsule, which then was untouched for more than 10,000 years.
Flint Dibble, I think I remember him lying about this as well. Or no, it was a different archaeologist. There was an archaeologist arguing with me on Twitter, as I do very often. Arguing with academics is a thing that I do. Also, I also am... I don't argue with all of them. I have them on the show quite often. And you can find an academic talking about Machiavelli on the Patreon, and that episode will be out a little bit cut down very soon here. I think next week it'll be out. That's my train of thought. Doing too many things. Where this person was like, there's no evidence that it was intentionally buried, and then shares a link with me, which says, yes, parts of it were intentionally buried. It was ridiculous. But yeah.
I can't help feeling that's precisely what Göbekli Tepe is. It's a time capsule. It's a memorial to a lost time. And I think that what we're looking at in that whole area is the outcome of contact with an earlier largely lost civilization. I think it passed on its cultural genes right there in that area of Turkey and down into the Jordan Valley and Cyprus. And not only there, also
I've been
the
to
Indus
Jordan,
Valley
beautiful
civilization.
country.
It's incredible iconography, which shows a man between two felines. It's a very striking image. You see a man and two tigers or leopards on either side of him, and he may be holding them apart, he may be gripping them in some way.
What is this so Jamie can find it?
You can find it on the Gebel al-Arak knife handle from Egypt. You can find it from Sayburk, Sayburk, in Turkey, the man between two felines. And you can find it in the Indus Valley civilization right across in Pakistan on these steatite seals that they used to make, where again you see that same icon of the man between two felines. And it suggests that
it's just
cultural
cat pictures.
ideas way back in
All right,
the
well, they're
remote
moving
past
past
were
it.
being spread around the world very, very rapidly.
Find anything there, Jamie?
I can tell
Maybe
you
not.
So how much of that area where Göbekli Tepe has been searched with LiDAR? Here it is. Here's the images. Look at that. Wow.
Yeah, there we are. That's Harappa. That's from the Indus Valley
A
civilization.
video about
Man between two
oh,
felines.
I thought you said about me.
yeah,
I didn't.
supposedly
No one's ever
represents.
made a video about me.
Nobody knows what
I'm sure
it
it'll happen
represents, but what's
eventually.
intriguing is that
Yeah.
it turns up in so many different places.
Yeah, if
But
you're
I'd
in the
like to find
Discord,
it.
send
Say-
it on Discord. But
Just
if
give me one
not, share
second
it
just to
below
find-
so people can look at
Find
it.
something. I hope I'm online here. I am.
How many of the areas have been searched with LiDAR?
Hang on, Joe. Bear with me. Just
No
one-
worries,
one-
no worries.
1 minute. This is where I have to take my bloody glasses off.
You got to go back and forth?
Yeah.
You looked at that. I'll show you that. Karen Tepe has some cool stuff that I don't think we've seen before.
Whoa.
There's this huge skeletal figure. This one, 12 feet high or something like that. Extraordinary.
Kind of similar to the Easter Island heads.
What's going on down there?
It is a little
His hog.
similar. I don't know if it's similar enough,
it
but
is.
yeah, they bring that up
How
in
weird are those
Ancient Apocalypse
structures?
season 2.
You know, but like the way their hands are placed, it's kind of similar to the way the
Ja-
Easter Island hands are placed.
Jamie, could I get plugged into the HDMI?
Sure. Do you need to?
Yeah.
Okay, pause.
Jamie
please.
doesn't want to
We'll
give up
pause.
his
We'll be right
HDMI.
back.
Good.
All right, we're back.
We're back. Okay, we found these images from. So this is from Jamie. Maybe you could expand that the Cyborg relief.
I think you have to do it.
Okay, it's on my.
Yeah.
There we go. So this
did he
is.
say? Sorry.
So this is from.
All right.
Band that. Okay, we found these images from. So this is from Jamie. Maybe you could expand that the Cyborg relief.
I think you have to do it.
Cyborg
Okay,
relief.
it's on my.
Yeah.
There we go. So this is about 10,000 years old. It's from a site in the area of Göbekli Tepe.
No, that is a cyborg
called Sayburk,
relief.
and it's gone.
Sayburk.
Here it is.
And
Yeah, I
it's,
love when he does
It's
the
clearly
low-
a man between two felines, and interestingly, he's holding his dick, exactly like that piece that you just showed from Karahan Tepe. And then
Yeah, go
if
ahead,
we
brother.
go
Yeah,
on-
share it on Discord. Share whatever you want on Discord. I'll take a look at it,
I don't
and if I
understand what I'm doing
if I
with this
think
thing. There it is.
I don't
So
wanna
then the
just-
Indus Valley.
always
Again.
slam him
I'm
with
controlling
stuff,
what's
but if
on
it's
the
something
screen.
he'd be
You are
interested
okay.
in,
So
I'll
there's the man
absolutely
between
share
two
it.
felines. Again, expand that.
So that particular image, is there any sort of a theory as to what they were trying what that represented?
Human mastery of animals is the only one I've heard that's being suggested.
But it seems like they're trying to get them.
Well, it does in that
They
in
are.
that case, rather
holding
than
them at
or
bay.
that he's
Not that you
holding
could,
them.
they look almost
he's
like
holding them at
tigers.
bay.
Keeping them from getting each other.
Yeah, and then if
Oh,
you
hey,
go
like the
down
video,
to the
please.
Egyptian one, which
Like
is the Gebel
the
al-Arak
video.
knife handle. There it is.
I would very
That's from
much
ancient
appreciate
Egypt,
it.
pre-dynastic Egypt, same thing.
That is a man dominated.
And then the next one is from Tiwanaku in Bolivia. That's a redrawing from Tiwanaku in Bolivia, and again, it's a man between
I've
two
never
felines.
seen any of these.
So when I
Man
see this
between
kind
two
of
felines, that's
complicated image turning up all around the world, I can't help feeling that there's a remote common source, which is sharing. It's not each culture representing or influencing the other. It's a remote common source that they all share.
What's the last one from where's it from again?
From Tiwanaku in Bolivia.
Look, what do you think he's got in his hands?
Well, it looks like two felines that he's holding apart. Two-
Right, but what are those things that are dangling down?
Why isn't he just
I-
saying cats?
Absolutely have no idea, and I'm not sure if anybody else does. Although I'm reminded in that one of the handbags.
Looks
that
like a
we-
halberd.
that we see in some of the
It's
figures
not,
from ancient
obviously,
Sumer.
but it looks
Right,
like
but
one.
what is the thing on the left?
Again, I don't know, and I don't think anybody
Very
does.
strange. And what are the? Why does he have steps on his
The one on the
chest and
left
a-
looks
and a
like an
wheel?
incense burner or
Like,
like
what
a
is
sage
that?
thing.
You
Looks
know?
like
What
it. I
is
don't
that-
know if
what
it
is
is,
that
but
spiral in the center of his
Gilgamesh
body?
holding two
It's a spiral
lions.
of
Interesting.
mystery. I honestly don't know the answer.
It's a
to that.
British
It's
thing.
like, look,
Oh,
it's
it is.
There's
Okay,
a
that makes sense.
geometric pattern.
You
And
see,
it goes up and down with the steps. and
Wait,
it
throw
repeats on
another
both corners
shrimp on
that
the bobby,
one
mate.
Where it
Yeah, that
steps
was on
up
purpose, by
and the
the
other
way.
side where it steps down.
yeah,
Very strange.
it would be nice if there were written records from Tiwanaku.
Wouldn't
which
that be
told us
sweet?
what it was about, but unfortunately there aren't.
Just very, very bizarre.
So what I'm saying is we're seeing
the
a
Discord
sudden
link
emergence of something that is being
is in the
recognized as a
description. It's on the
civilization
link
in
space.
Turkey
Let me
just
know if it doesn't work.
immediately after Göbekli
There's a
Tepe,
link
around
space
the
link
time
that
of
has it. I
Göbekli
need to
Tepe.
put the Discord
And we're
link in
seeing
on
it
its
in
own,
the
but
Jordan
anyone who wants to
Valley,
join,
and
join
we're seeing
that.
it in the Indus Valley, and we're seeing it in South America as well. The same iconography keeps on repeating, and I don't think it's a coincidence.
The area where the Olmec are, have there ever been LiDAR excavations or
I wouldn't be surprised if there
Discoveries?
have. Villa Hermosa, the sort of central of the Olmec area, is a very highly populated area. It's been
you can't
heavily,
click on
heavily
it?
developed. The areas where
I'll grab you a
LiDAR has
Discord
been
link.
used in Mexico and Central America and Guatemala has been finding thousands of Mayan ruins that nobody knew were there before. Again, under the jungle canopy. LiDAR has been used extensively in the Yucatan in Mexico and into Guatemala as well. But whether it's been used, there
look
we
at
are.
that? Hundreds of
And
long
Olmec
lost
ceremonial centers. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. This is all thank you LiDAR, you know.
So crazy that stuff was there all along
and nobody knew.
and nobody knew.
Yeah.
Discord link is in the
of course,
description now.
The Amazon rainforest is in
Glad
even
to have you in
bigger
there,
rainforest than this.
Turkish
And
brother.
What's hiding in it
Right.
is a mystery that needs to be solved in the coming years
Right.
if we're going to have any idea of our own past. I think the Amazon's incredibly important. It's why I chose to focus season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse on the Americas, because I think in terms of the quest for the origins of civilization, the Americas are the most neglected area. Archaeologists haven't looked there. They define themselves as being in favor of indigenous peoples and against any kind of
glad he's bringing
supremacy,
this
but
up.
by and large they look to Europe and to
Right.
the Middle East as the origins
And that's
of
what
civilization.
Flint did
They don't
in that
consider
episode.
it might have been in the Americas. And what we're trying to show is that the story in the Americas is much older than it's been, and that there are mysteries here that have never been explained by archaeology.
How much of the Amazon has been explored with LiDAR?
A very tiny proportion.
Very tiny
I worked
percentage.
with the team who
Flint
were doing
misrepresented
this,
that.
and they're solely in the
Like the
province
video,
of Acre,
please. Help me.
in the southwest of
I need
Brazil.
likes.
They haven't worked in other areas. What would be needed?
feed off
I'm-
of likes.
I'm hoping some amazing philanthropist will come forward, and if such a philanthropist will come forward, I can connect him with the people who are doing the work in Acre. That we have a LiDAR survey of the whole of the Amazon. That's what I'd like to see. And it wouldn't be a
Andean
billion-dollar
history
project because
does
it
matter.
can be done with drones now. It could be relatively cost efficient.
That would be incredible. Just imagine what's out there.
Yeah. And we have the tech. We can do that. We can do a LiDAR survey of the Amazon.
Where specifically did they think that lost city of Z was? And did they try to explore that yet?
I think it was in Ecuador or Colombia. I can't remember. That was Percy Fawcett, wasn't
Ecuador
it?
is the one that they found. I don't know about Percy
Kind of,
Fawcett, though, which is what they're referencing. Great movie. Not a
Echo
documentary, but a
of
movie.
that earlier discovery of lost
Yes.
cities in the Amazon.
narrative,
These
a
stories
story.
won't go away because there is a hidden past in the Amazon.
Right.
And because there were cities in the Amazon, and God knows what was in them, before the Spanish came along and destroyed everything.
God, it seems like that has to be discovered. I mean, that has to be looked at.
Classic English
But just
anti-Spanish sentiment.
specifically, if we could just find that the lost city of Z was a real place.
If we could find it was a real place,
Yeah.
I wish we could.
I mean, just finding lost city of Z is a
Percy
legendary city in
Fawcett.
the Amazon rainforest, and British explorer Percy Harrison Fawcett, I
Mato
believe was
Grosso.
Mato Grosso,
In Brazil, yeah.
theorized that the city was a refuge for people fleeing the destruction of Atlantis. Whoa. That its wisdom could still be found there. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think we're going to find the lost city of X and Y as well,
I bet.
and W,
Maybe ABC,
and
D.
possibly A, B, C, and D too. Yeah.
Maybe a bunch, yeah.
Yeah.
It's at the very least, it's clear that not enough is known.
Southwest of the
Not-
Amazon.
not enough
That's
is known.
like
And-
Peru,
and
I think.
I think it's right and proper that we have curiosity about our past, and I think it's unfortunate that people, including myself,
Right and proper.
who express that curiosity without any dogma, but simply are mystified by problems from the past, are so likely to get slapped down and face this abusive
Bolivia,
power grab
Terminator says.
by archaeology, who are saying the past is ours, you may not intrude here, we will define you as a pseudoscientist, we will call you a hoaxer and a liar. I defy anyone out there to find a single statement I've made that is a lie. And a lie is a knowing untruth.
Yeah.
As far as I know, I have never, ever told
Flint has.
knowingly an untruth. What a stupid thing
I
to
will
do
defend that.
Right.
would be. That would scupper my whole work.
exactly.
I may have made some honest mistakes. Everybody does, including the most godlike archaeologist. But I have never knowingly told an untruth, and I never would.
Of course not. The interesting thing, though, is
But seriously, I'd like an example, because this is thrown at me so many
Yeah.
times.
You can't be responding to the haters all the time. It's bad.
Flint
But they
also
include
called me a liar.
archaeologists.
I
did
know,
not.
but the reality is most people aren't
defi-
listening anymore.
Define the untruth.
I
that I've
don't
told.
think that's working anymore, because I think enough
It's
people have
not.
seen your work and enough
Yeah.
people have heard you talk, and they know that you're reasonable and intelligent and
Yeah.
that there's something there.
Yeah.
And the more people look at these images and the more people hear people like Flint just out and out lie to try to dismiss these things.
It was most unfortunate. I think he let archaeology down very badly
did.
in the way that he manipulated.
archaeology.
that
He let it
debate.
down. He did.
And I'm sorry it's taken me so long to come back with the fact checking, but it was necessary to do. And I'm very grateful to a number of completely independent, separate individuals on the internet who have drawn attention to some of what Flint did.
Yes.
One calls himself illegitimate scholar, and the other calls himself debunking. And,
Yeah.
and they got into this material very, very early and helped me to understand how I'd been duped by this material. Because I took it all
Oh
at face
my
value.
God.
at the
Well,
time.
that's the beautiful thing about the internet.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people out there that are very invested in these ideas and exploring them, and they also find it very uncomfortable that they're being confronted by these scholars, these people that are supposed to be the ones that are the experts in this area, that are dismissing things
way,
that shouldn't be
dude.
dismissed, that
Yeah.
are lying about
Amazing.
statistics,
Yeah.
just try to diffuse your argument.
Yeah, and there's also that feeling of being patronized
Yeah.
by the so-called experts. Nobody wants to be patronized
No.
and feel that somebody else regards them as too stupid to make up their own mind on something.
Right. And they think that somehow or another that exploring these ideas dismisses the legitimate work that archaeologists have already done, which I don't think it does at all.
Not at all. Archaeologists have done some fantastic work,
Yeah.
and it's really important work. What I've realized is that there's almost two different mindsets at work here in looking at the past. I think archaeology is very determined to
I can't believe
demonstrate
it.
that it's a
Yeah.
science, that it's a
Play it
hard
again. I'm going to
science.
play it again.
Dismiss these people who think
Archaeologists.
I know, but the
Well,
reality is most people
defi-
aren't listening anymore.
Define the untruth.
I
that I've
don't
done.
think that's working anymore.
gonna play it
'cause I
again,
think enough
Vingle.
people have seen your work and enough
Yeah.
people have heard you talk, and they know that you're reasonable and intelligent, and
Yeah.
that there's something there.
Yeah.
And the
Someone
more people
commented
look at
it
these
earlier,
images, the
Kate,
more people hear
that it was going to happen.
people like
I
Flint
knew it was
just out
coming.
and out lie.
It's still
to try
amazing
to dismiss
to
these
hear it.
things.
It was most unfortunate. I think he let archaeology down very badly in the way that he manipulated that debate. And I'm sorry it's taken me so long to come back with the fact checking, but it was necessary to do. And I'm very grateful to a number of completely independent, separate individuals on the internet who have drawn attention to some of what Flint did.
Yes.
One calls himself illegitimate scholar, and the other calls himself debunking. And,
Yeah.
and they got into this material very, very early and helped me to understand how I'd been duped by this material. Because I took it all at face value at the
Well,
time.
that's the beautiful thing about the
Dude.
internet.
Yeah.
You know, there's
One more
a lot
time.
of-
Took it
One more
early and
time.
helped me to understand Flint did.
Yes.
One calls himself illegitimate scholar, and the other calls himself debunking. And they got into this material very, very early and helped me to understand how I'd been duped by this material. Because I
Oh
took
my
it all at face.
It's just like, this is my life, right? Like I love this stuff. This is everything to me. And just to hear it like that on the biggest podcast ever from somebody who I've looked up to for over a decade, I just, it's unreal, man. It's absolutely unreal. And I know there's people in the comments that have been here for a very long time, back to when I was getting a few dozen listens on the podcast episode before I even had a YouTube. I can't believe it. Man, it's just, it's not good for my retention to just be sitting here in silence, but like, you know, you have to like take in like a moment like that. It's like, it just, like I've thanked everybody here a number of times this episode just for being here and listening and engaging with this stuff with me. But really, all I've ever wanted in my life is for people to care about what I have to say. And to have it, you know, legitimized in that way on this show from somebody, it means everything. Yeah. So again, thank you all for being here. Somebody said to play it again. I'll play it one more time. That'll be 4 times.
Flint did.
Yes.
One calls himself illegitimate scholar, and the other calls it to do. And I'm very grateful to a number of completely independent, separate individuals on the internet who have drawn attention to some of what Flint did.
Yes.
One calls himself illegitimate scholar, and the other calls himself debunking. And they got into this material very, very early and helped me to understand how I'd been duped by this material, because I took it all at face value at the time.
That's the beautiful thing about the internet.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people out there that are very invested in these ideas and exploring them, and they also find it very uncomfortable that they're being confronted by these scholars, these people that are supposed to be the ones that are the experts in this area, that are dismissing things that shouldn't be dismissed, that are lying about statistics, just try to diffuse your argument.
Yeah. And there's also that feeling of being patronized by the so-called experts. Nobody wants to be patronized and feel that somebody else regards them as too stupid to make up their own mind on something.
Right. And they think that somehow or another that exploring these ideas dismisses the legitimate work that archaeologists have already done, which I don't think
Thank you for being here, Dakini.
Not at all. Archaeologists have done some fantastic work. Yeah. And it's really important work.
If you're here from that, if you're here from Graham mentioning me, welcome. Most of what I do here is you know, it's illegitimate scholar. I'm not legitimized by any institution. I don't have a PhD. I have 3 bachelor's degrees: history, anthropology, and education. I got certified to teach secondary school history. And there are 2 videos that are under 10 minutes. I don't do a lot of standalone short form. It's a lot of live streams. It's those interviews with people. And I'll be having Graham Hancock on soon, which is amazing. I think early November. That won't come out for a little while after that, but just you can find those videos there if you on the channel, less than 10 minutes, on Flint Dibble, and then his response. And Flint called me a liar. I did not lie. I shared the information. My sources were on the screen. It was all archaeological research. I am not a liar, Flint, and I take my integrity very seriously, something that I don't believe that you do. And I don't find Flint to just be wrong and dishonest. I find him to be an outright liar who lied several times. But that's not important, okay? Like, that's a separate thing. It's it just means everything to me. Everything.
What I've realized is that there's almost 2 different mindsets at work here in looking at the past. I think archaeology is very determined to demonstrate that it's a science, that it's a hard science, that it's completely rational, that it's all based on scientific method, and anything that sounds unscientific, which include myths, must be avoided. And also, I do find that archaeology, and it may be true in other sciences as well, very reluctant to use the imagination. The imagination is seen as...
The interview with Graham will be pre-recorded. All the podcast episodes are pre-recorded. Yeah, it does put me on Rogan's radar. The thing is, I'd love to talk. I love Joe Rogan. I've been listening to him for 10 years, but you know, when I started this, I was going through a process of starting the podcast, and my number one like dream person to talk to was Graham Hancock. There's no one else. It was Graham Hancock, and at the time, this was over, I think, about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. That was a joke. It was a fantasy, and if I were going to reach it, I didn't think it would be. I didn't think it would be this quick. I didn't think I would get to this point. I didn't even ask Graham Hancock for an interview. I wouldn't have been so presumptuous. He offered it to me. And for him to do that means everything to me. I can't wait to talk to him. For him to mention me on Joe Rogan and to hear him say that as well, the impact that I had is... Gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And Axios Fitness is bringing up a good point. The good old boys to JRE pipeline. Shout out to Bog Beef and Marbleck, man. That their show, Good Old Boys. I've had them on. I've done a live stream with them, and I've been on their podcast twice. But they were the first relatively large podcast to have me on, and that meant everything. And I can't believe it. So check out the Good Old Boys, man. They have a great show on Patronage. It's more political. It's great. It's a great show. I can't believe it. And thank you to Jimmy Corsetti as well. I was on his channel. He's another one. He would have been second or third, fourth, maybe. I can't think of anyone else besides Joe Rogan and Flint Dibble that I'd want to go on. I'd love to go on Joe Rogan's podcast. I don't know if that'll happen. I'm not really worried about it because, that'll be, it won't be as huge as going on as talking to Graham Hancock. Yeah, man, it is a dream come true. It is a dream come true. All right. I got another 40 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for being here. If you want to support the show, you don't have to. I just appreciate you being here. I really do. And usually it would just, I would be getting paid by the ad revenue, not on the live stream, but after. I can't take donations right now. So Patreon, if you want to support the show, or Axios Fitness, our sponsor, which I really recommend. It helps me out so much. It has. I stuck my neck out against a crooked academy clique that's fighting dirty, and you're beating them. You deserve this, man. Thank you, Abo. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Seriously. And those links are down below to the Patreon and Axios, and my Twitter is illscholar, ill_scholar. I got a lot of threads on there. Yeah, and I want to grow the community of independent research. I really do. And our Turkish friend, I will check out that video that you posted on the Discord eventually. Thank you for being there, and join the Discord, guys. Join the Discord. Can't believe it. It's unreal, man.
As a deadly threat, whereas I think imagination is a really important thing in interpreting the past. We should be open to possibilities rather than coming into what we confront with a closed idea. We should consider how it might have been, what might have happened. Let's use our imagination and think about this. Think what all this means. Think what that common iconography all around the world means, rather than just saying, "Oh, it's a coincidence."
Well, in some places that's your only option, like the Olmec culture, where we don't know. Well, we have these faces that don't look like.
Yeah,
I mean, it's confusing. They look like maybe they're from Polynesia.
Yeah,
maybe they're from Africa.
Yeah, could be Polynesia, could be Africa, and then there are these other faces, which in the video I've put out, I've shown some of these. It's not just myths of a bearded foreigner turning up in the Americas, which Flint Dibble and other archaeologists say were all concocted and invented by the Spaniards. We discussed that during the debate. I have a real problem with that because that is patronizing to the indigenous people. I think the myths were there amongst the indigenous people, and I think the Spaniards saw how they could use them, how they could manipulate them, but I don't think they made up the myths and somehow imposed them upon the indigenous people who then believed that they were their own myths. I don't think they were that stupid. They knew what their myths were.
Well, my concern with that line of thinking is that we've seen evidence of that sort of destruction of the real history of people in America with how they forced Native Americans onto
reservations. Thanks for coming here from Jimmy. Jimmy's busy, but he'll be on the podcast eventually. I hope. I really like Jimmy as well. He's huge.
Forced them into speaking English and forced them into learning Christianity.
Yeah, I'll take a look. If I forget, let me know on another live stream because stuff gets buried. I'm not very organized. I need to work on it.
That on the people that were there.
But this is a kind of conspiracy theory that's being proposed that the Spanish, Cortez and Pizarro and others who were involved in the conquest of the Americas, that they got together and they created a fiction, and then they made the indigenous people believe that fiction. While accepting everything else that the indigenous people believed, that was a fiction. There's no document which says that Spaniards conspired to create these stories. I believe that when we find them in Mexico, when we find them in Peru, when we find them in Colombia, when we find them in Bolivia, we are looking at indigenous traditions. And I have no doubt that the Spanish saw those traditions and said, we can use this, we can take advantage of this, we can exploit this, but I don't think they made up the traditions.
So it's possibly a myth of people that came over on ships that look different.
Yeah.
Serpent Bros. I've never heard of this.
That's about
Serpent
what it comes
Bros.
to.
When you hear about things like the Lost City of Z, and you hear about all the different times where European explorers did make it to the Americas and spread their diseases, like, well, you're going to miss from those folks too. So who's to think that there wasn't multiple versions of that happened all throughout history?
Yeah, I suspect.
If it happened in the 1400s, it probably happened a long, long time ago as well.
Yeah.
The whole thing is so interesting, and it never ends. And every now and again, a new discovery comes along that pushes back the date of humans in specific areas. I mean, look at the Denisovans. They only found out about them in, like what, 2010 or something like that?
Very recently. I think Santha and I went to Denisova Cave in 2013.
Crazy.
Something like that.
So a whole new branch of the...
previously unknown.
Crazy.
And there's so much that's unknown about our past.
Oh, I know what I wanted to bring up to you today because I saw this online. Maybe you could find it before I could pull it up, Jamie, because you're that good. But there's a scientist that believes there's reason to believe that those Hobbit people in the island of Flores, that they exist currently. So this was... the Hobbit-like species of early humans may still be living in the jungles of Indonesia.
Interesting theory.
Yeah.
And
well, that's another branch of the human chain that when did they find out about this? It wasn't that long ago either.
It certainly wasn't. I think you're looking around 2000s, 2010 maybe. Very, very recent discovery.
I wonder what the latest findings published on Tuesday, Journal of Nature Communications, following the 2016 discovery of tiny arm bone and teeth. There's something that these people are considering. I don't know why. You see, is there any article that says they consider they're still alive today? That's what this one is? But that one, no.
It's like a small version of Bigfoot.
Yeah, this is 2 years old. Okay. Someone sent this to me.
Yeah.
So why do they think that there's might still roam? Well, this is just because of anecdotal stories, right? Because there have been multiple stories that people that live in the deep rainforest have said that they've encountered these.
Why not?
Why
not? Why should it be impossible? It has a parallel with the Bigfoot story, of course, a different size of creature, but maybe creatures have survived, which we think are extinct.
Especially small populations of them that are very remote and very difficult to get. There are reports of sightings.
I followed those Brothers of the Serpent guys on Twitter.
All of whom I spoke with directly, and I conclude the best way to explain that what they told me is a non-sapiens hominin has survived on Flores to the present or very recent times.
He does. I've heard it.
Yeah.
I would love to hear their stories.
Oh, imagine maybe AI could decipher their language. Imagine they found them You know how nutty it would be if they found a little 3-foot tall, hairy human being that's still alive? Oh my goodness!
Just for clarity, he made this
Intelligent
claim and put out a book.
People
So
that really just
might be like, come read my book, you know.
Well, it's a good thing to do if you have a good theory.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Write a
for
book.
sure if you got
I know what you're saying, though. I know what you're saying. Yeah. I hope it's true, of course. Of course.
Of course.
Because it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to hope it's true. All of it's fun.
That's what I'm so grateful to the universe for, and so grateful to my readers for, is that I have been given this opportunity to live a fun life.
Oh, yeah.
And to travel the world and to investigate mysteries and to put across my point of view on those mysteries. I couldn't do any of that if it wasn't for my readers. I've never had sponsorship. I've never sought anybody to fund me to do anything. I started out massively in debt.
Besides selling
I've
books.
got to the place now where I can travel whenever I want and explore places, and that's all down to my readers. It's not just me; it's me and my readers that are making this possible.
Readers
and
like
I'm
you.
enormously grateful to them, and these days my viewers as well.
You're a very lucky man. I was
I'm-
going to say
I'm
that
blessed.
earlier when you were talking about how you've never taken a vacation. Like, well,
I'm blessed.
you
in
haven't, but
a
your
s-
whole life's a vacation.
Exactly. That's why I don't see.
Yeah.
I'm 74 years old now. I don't see myself retiring. The idea of retirement is just out of the question.
You
for
try
me.
to retire, I'll go find you. I'm going to go grab you, drag you out,
I love
give you
doing.
some vitamins.
I love doing what I do.
Yeah.
And I hope it's contributed something useful to the world rather than just flim flam.
Oh no, it most certainly has. It most certainly has. You know, I first found out about you because of Fingerprints of the Gods, and
Yeah.
one of the things that I
I'm
found
sure he would if
most
he could.
fascinating when I started going into your work was the idea that the Ark of the Covenant exists in
Yeah.
Ethiopia.
That's what brought me into this field.
Yeah.
Before that, I wrote all about current affairs.
That story is so nuts, and it sounds so ridiculous, and people, you go, what? The Ark of the Covenant's real? But then when you go into the history of these people that lived there, and they all suffered radiation poisoning, and it's like, wait a minute.
Cataracts over their
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that there's an indigenous population of Old Testament Jews in Ethiopia, the Falashas, who have their own story about how the Ark of the Covenant got there.
Not
Right.
treated
Different
very
from the
well.
Ethiopian national epic, which is called the Kebra Nagast, the glory of kings. That's why I got into this field. I was a current affairs guy, and Ethiopia was on my beat, and I just kept on coming across this story, and I realized it was central to Ethiopian culture, and I decided to investigate it and explore it, and it led to The Sign and the Seal, which was published in 1992, and that's what set me on the path to Fingerprints of the Gods and everything that followed that.
So who is getting the cataracts?
The guardian of the Ark. This is a monk who is appointed. The place is Aksum in the province of Tigray in northern Ethiopia. It's a massive.
Stuff
Massively
going on
interesting
there
place.
past few
Aksum
years.
has
It's
these
quieted down,
huge
but
granite stelae. They're very similar in many ways to ancient Egyptian obelisks. They're a
Oh,
bit
is
different
he?
in shape, but
Whatever,
same
dude.
sort of height.
I don't
some of them
even
going
care.
110 feet
Yes.
high.
Click
cut
like.
Out of, cut
Thank
out
you.
of solid granite.
Do it.
Right up there in the highlands of Ethiopia. And then they have an ancient church, the Church of St. Mary, a cathedral actually of St. Mary of Zion, where the Ark apparently was kept for hundreds and hundreds of years. Before that it was kept elsewhere. And then now it's been moved into a chapel that stands next to St. Mary of Zion Cathedral. And that chapel is guarded by armed men. The whole town is an armed camp that is protecting what they believe to be the Ark of the Covenant, but it's guarded particularly by one guy who is the official guardian of the Ark, and he's elected by other monks to be the guardian of the Ark, and several of them have run away when they get that election, because once you're elected as the guardian of the Ark, when the previous one has died, you're going to be kept in that chapel forever. You'll never be allowed to leave it. So they're close to whatever this object is. They're close to it. And I met 3 of them over a succession of years because their mortality is once they're appointed, they die very soon, and they all have
Legitimate
these
scholar,
cataracts
yeah.
over their eyes, and they all
the name
blame
the
object.
name is of course like it's a reference to not being legitimized by an institution, like not having a PhD essentially, which I'm proud of. That's why I chose it as a name, right? But yeah, I by the important people, I'm legitimate.
in that chapel, whether or not it's the Ark, for causing.
Let
their
Dibble
blindness.
have his meltdown.
Wow.
So it's
Look, if you go to the Danny Jones interview, he goes on Danny Jones. The video gets heavily disliked. The comments are attacking him. I'm sorry, Flint, you did this to yourself, man. It's not like I wish you hadn't. I wish you had been more fair, but you weren't. You were dishonest. And I don't know if Flint truly believes he was honest, but that's cope. It's delusion. You just weren't. And we've shown that. Graham has shown that. I've shown that. Dedunking has done the most work. He's shown that. And I'm going to do more. There's more coming. That video on just the first half is coming. And I found things that I don't think anyone else has from that first thread that he did. It's not good. I'm sorry, Flint. You did that to yourself. Nobody did that to you. Nobody did that but you.
No one is going in there and trying to get to.
Look, I don't like it. I wish it hadn't happened that way. I guess it gave me the opportunity to get noticed, which is great by people that I highly respect. But I'm not Steven Crowder. I'm not out here trying to argue with people. That's not what I do. It was necessary at this point because nobody else had the capabilities that I did. No one else, or they do, but they weren't doing it. I don't like it. Oh gosh, he's freaking out. Look, I'll look at Dibble's comments later, but I'm going to keep it positive for right now.
To the bottom of it, they won't let you.
They won't let you. They won't let you. And
Can you bribe them?
No.
It seems like someone should go look.
Yeah, Dibble also blocks everybody.
Yeah.
What's
Later,
in there?
Blue Floss.
I mean, if we really
Blue
find out
Floss,
the
thank
Ark
you
of the
so much for your
Covenant was an
support
actual
again
object.
on Patreon. I appreciate it.
I think it was an actual object.
And
Yeah,
you
I don't
think it
feel
was
bad
some
for him.
nuclear
It's
something
just
or another?
this
I don't know what
situation
it
is
was.
unfortunate. It's not the way
I
I
think it's
wanted
what-
it to go.
Is rightly described as an out-of-place artifact, because if you look at the description in the book of Exodus, the very precise dimensions of it, I think in modern terms we'd say 3 feet 9 inches long by 2 feet 3 inches high and wide. It's got a layer of gold, it's got a layer of wood, it's got another layer of gold. It's very precisely specified, like a blueprint in the book of Exodus. And then it does all this stuff. It shoots out jets of fire and kills completely innocent people. It kills 50,000
He did it to himself,
Philistines in the city of Ashdod when they briefly capture it from the Israelites and make the mistake of treating it like a tourist object, and they open the Ark of the Covenant and look inside, and suddenly everybody in that city is dying, and what they're dying of is cancerous tumors. This is described in the Old Testament. So it's intriguing that this object is so precisely specified and is reported to have done these terrible things.
It's just insane that we know where it is.
Well, we know that I believe Ethiopia has a very strong claim to it, but that's all I can say because I've not seen it myself. I've been right outside the door of that sanctuary chapel several times. But
Did you bring a Geiger counter?
No, that would be a good thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine it was going nuts as you got close.
That would be a good thought.
I mean, it's not like it's going to be
just
if it's
posted about
radioactive.
this.
It's not like it's going to be contained just to this one small area. You're going to have traces of it that leak out.
That's true. It would be a good way
Especially
to
if people are getting cataracts from being in the room with it.
Yeah.
And so 3 different people you talk to have cataracts from that.
Yeah, and they all blame the Ark, and one of them, it's a resonant phrase,
Wow.
which sticks in my memory.
In modern times,
I asked him why, and he said the Ark is a thing of fire. Just that.
Did he describe it to you?
He did describe it as a box, rather like the biblical description, unsurprisingly. But
Did he describe what it looked like the outside of it?
Gold.
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 Wow.
And of course, gold is a very good insulator against radiation. I don't want to go too far down this track. To me, the
Too speculative.
The fascinating thing is that Ethiopia is the only country in the world that actually claims to have the Ark of the Covenant. That it's central to religion and culture in Ethiopia today. That there's much to support that argument, particularly in the form of the Falashas, the Ethiopian Jews, and their very ancient traditions about how they got to Ethiopia in the first place. In context of all of that, I think Ethiopia has a very good claim, very interesting claim, and that's why I wrote a book about it.
That one to me is just like, we know where it is.
Yeah.
That one to me is so crazy that someone is keeping that information from the rest of the humans.
Yeah.
Because if we found out the Ark of the Covenant was in fact a real object and we know where it is and it does match the description in the Bible, that kind of changes everything. Now all of a sudden the Bible is not just stories and myths. The Bible is some sort of a historical record.
Yeah. Well, let's not forget that one of the world's best-known flood myths also comes
Thank
from
you,
the Bible,
Shaman.
which is the flood of Noah.
These are the exact words.
Which again is part of this worldwide tradition, of which I am absolutely convinced Atlantis should be understood as a part of that worldwide tradition of a global flood and the loss of a former civilization. And again, it's one of the reasons why I've done the work I've done over these years.
So when you're doing season 2, what did you learn from doing season 1 that you applied to season 2? Was there anything different about the way you went about it?
Definitely. I have learned from the criticisms of archaeologists, and one of the first things that became very clear to me, and they're absolutely right, is we need more indigenous voices in this series. And that's what we've made sure to do. We have an amazing indigenous archaeologist from Easter Island. We spent quite a bit of time filming in Easter Island, and it's a strong... This series doesn't do country by country episodes. It's all merged together. Different bits of the story come together in each episode, but a good chunk of it is on Easter Island, and there Sonia Hoa Cardinali is an indigenous Easter Islander. Her married name is Cardinali because she married an Italian guy, and she gave us incredible material on Easter Island, and she revealed that she and her team have found what are called banana phytoliths.
So in anthropological terms, a myth doesn't necessarily mean fake. It doesn't mean that it's not real. It means that it's like a foundational story from a culture. So by that definition, the Bible is by definition a myth. That doesn't mean that it's fake, but yes, people argue about how much of it is real and how much is made up, but who knows? It's yes, it's a collection of stories, but it's a collection of stories that form the basis of a culture or religion. That is what a myth is by this definition, not by like the colloquial use of the word myth.
Now, phytoliths are a minute part of the banana plant. They've excavated them from a crater in Easter Island, and they've found that those are 3,000 years old. Now, this is interesting for two reasons. Firstly, bananas do not propagate naturally. You can't get bananas to Easter Island without human beings bringing them there. That's how they got there. And secondly, the date that she's found 3,000-year-old banana phytoliths in Easter Island blows out of the water the notion that Easter Island was only settled 1,000 years ago or less, which is the current idea of archaeology. Again and again, we've had indigenous guests on the show who have brought real important information to it. Amongst those geoglyphs,
they deny their own humanity.
Brazil, we had a member of the Apurina people who is a caretaker for those geoglyphs, and he talked to us about what is special to him about the geoglyphs, about how this is a sacred place to his tribe, and how they still gather there today, and how they understand that it's somehow connected to the journey to the next world, to the journey of life after death. And that then rings a bell in my mind of that whole idea of a journey to the afterlife and a portal through which we pass into that other realm. We find that right there in Brazil.
So if the Easter Island, if the island was settled at least 3,000 years ago, do we know where from?
Well, 3,000 years ago, you're still within the period of the Polynesian expansion. This is not the Ice Age. This is more recent.
Right.
It's early in the Polynesian expansion rather than late. The Easter Island was seen as one of the last places that the Polynesians got to. This new evidence is suggesting it may have been one of the first places that the Polynesians got to. But the question that arises is, did they find the Moai already in place when they came there, even 3,000 years ago? And I think there's a lot of evidence for that. I think that this is going to make archaeologists absolutely furious with me. But I hope that
Look, the banana
I'm
being there
paying full
3,000
respect
years.
to indigenous
That's
traditions.
good
We
evidence.
had an amazing Easter Island elder who told us the tradition of the lost land of Hiva. Easter Island has its own flood myth. They say that there was a huge land in the Pacific, far, far away, called Hiva, and that it was Hiva, and that it was destroyed in a flood cataclysm, and that there were survivors, specifically 7 wise men. That's another thing that is found all around the world. It's found in ancient Sumer, it's found in ancient Egypt, it's found almost everywhere. Specific seven wise men who came and settled Easter Island after this great cataclysm. So it's great to have indigenous testimony on that. And then you have the mystery of the Easter Island script. How did that happen? How come this tiny island, which only ever had a population of a few thousand, did something that is normally only done by big civilizations, which was create a written script? But they have a script, the Easter Island script, and it's written on wooden boards.
I got it.
And we learned that these were the boards we see today, none of which, by the way, are in Easter Island now. They're all in museums around the world. They themselves were copies of earlier wooden boards that wore out. And these things go back far into the remote past as far as the indigenous people of Easter Island are concerned. To have a fully formed, elaborate script, which nobody can interpret today, you have to remember the tragic history of Easter Island. There was a point where Easter Island's population was reduced to just 11 people. And it was reduced to 11
that
people
low?
by Peruvian slave raids. They came and slaved the people of Easter Island, and they took them to work in Peru and put them elsewhere in the Pacific. Eventually, there was a movement to restore them to their homeland, and gradually people came back. But at one point, its population was reduced to 11. All the elders were wiped out, those who were the memory carriers. And so what's left now is just a hint of a memory of these things. But they speak with awe of these tablets with the script on it. And to me, that is a sign again that there's something wrong with our understanding of Easter Island. How can we explain that this tiny little place produces its own written language? Why would it even need a written language when you can walk across the island in 3 hours?
Yes,
it wouldn't
Thor
need
Heyerdahl
to
is amazing
in that way. And yet
I'm actually I just recently found in a bookstore a first edition 1950 Kontiki book by Thor Heyerdahl, and I'm going to give it to Graham when I see him in a few weeks here. Yeah, he probably won't watch this, so that won't be spoiled. But
that's great.
Yeah.
And the script, can we see what it looks like? You can find the Easter Island script, Jamie?
If you look up the word Rongo Rongo, RONGO, Rongo Rongo tablets.
One of the things that's interesting about AI is that they believe that AI is going to be able to determine or decipher a bunch of different things that we currently can't.
There they are.
Oh, wow.
That's
crazy.
It bears some curious similarities to the Indus Valley script, which has also not been deciphered. And let's hope AI can decipher both of them.
Look at that. That's
and the way it runs is you read from left to right along the top row, then you go from right to left along the next row, then you go from left to right along the next row, and so on and so forth. A sort of snake-like.
How do they know that?
Because that's one of the memories that's been preserved by the Easter Islanders, and because of the way they all run on.
And what do they think it represents?
According to Leo, the elder who we talked to in Easter Island, it contains memories of the past. It contains memories of the past in Easter Island, instructions on how to navigate, information about the stars, and information about how to live as a community.
Wow. But in a language that we don't
the number
know.
7 is very important in the
knows
Bible.
All we have
it's
is
too
an
in
oral
depth for us
tradition,
to
which
go
itself
into.
is very
but
fragmented
the
and
7,
very faint
it comes
because
up
of that
so much.
reduction of Easter Island's population to just 11 people, and the fact that the elders who were, within historical times, able to read these tablets were all wiped out.
How did they decipher cuneiform?
Cuneiform, I think, because of its relationship to later languages, which were known. That's I mean, cuneiform is a writing system. You find the earliest version, I think, amongst the Sumerians, and then in later Babylonian society as well. But when you have a language and you have a language that it's related to that you can read, or where you have a text in two different languages, but it's the same text, then you're in a place where you can begin to translate it. That's what the Rosetta Stone does in ancient Egypt, because we have it in the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, but we also have it in Greek. And that's why suddenly the code of the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs was cracked because of the Rosetta Stone. Well, there isn't a Rosetta Stone for the Easter Island script or for the Indus Valley script. But I think in the case of the cuneiform, there was something similar, some context to place it in.
So the Easter Island, these enormous statues, one of the things they found, and I don't know when they started doing this, they dug deeper and deeper and deeper and found out that the heads that are above the surface are just a tiny part of it. So do you think that it's just natural erosion that covered up everything else?
No.
You think it was purposely?
I think it's a very complicated issue. The issue of erosion, it's not so much erosion, it's the deposition of sediment. It's the deposition of sediment
over time.
Over time, and what we're looking at with these Easter Island heads, I was fortunate to know. There we are, and there's. I was just going to say I was fortunate to know Thor Heyerdahl, and there he is in the blue safari suit, standing at the shoulder of the Easter Island Moai, and you can see that the dark bit is the bit that was above ground. And then they dig down and they find that it goes down 30 feet underground, this enormous thing. And this is not as a result of being exposed by erosion. This had to be excavated in order to reveal it.
Right.
And the issue is, on this tiny island, how much, if this thing is only 700 years old, which is something that archaeologists often say, 700 or 1,000 years old, if it's only that old, how do you get 30 feet of sedimentation on this tiny island in just 700 years? It looks like a much longer period that would be required to create that depth of sedimentation.
Put that image back up again, please. So how much time do you think, I mean, has there been speculation? Like if it just natural layers of sediment being dropped down, how long would it take to cover something like that?
Well, this is where I'd like to defer to the work of Dr. Robert Schoch, who's a brilliant expert in this field. We invited Robert Schoch to join us in season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse, but he declined. I think that's unfortunate because I think Robert Schoch has done breakthrough work on Easter Island, and it's Robert Schoch
probably
who
because he's scared of other academics attacking him.
This deep burial of these statues by natural sedimentation is a problem. It's a chronological problem that speaks to these statues being much older than we imagine they are.
Well, is Robert Schoch declining because of the criticism that he received about the Temple of the Sphinx?
I'm not sure why.
He probably doesn't want to deal with it anymore.
I've always regarded Robert as a good friend, but he and I have not spoken since 2015.
On purpose?
Well, I would love to speak to Robert.
Is he trying not to talk to you?
And I take every opportunity to express my admiration for him. And Robert has been very brave. He is a credentialed geologist, and he has stuck his neck out on the Sphinx. And a lot of people want to cut his head off for doing that. And I appreciate his courage, and I appreciate his openness of mind and his willingness to get into this. But I don't know, somewhere between 2013, we were still good friends. We traveled to Gunung Padang together in 2013.
What year did he do the podcast, Jamie? He did our podcast back in the day.
Yeah.
I want to say it was around 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
6 years ago? Okay. So 2018. Maybe that's why I stopped being your friend.
No, I don't know why it is. Maybe I did something that offended him. Sometimes I can be very unpleasant and can be very angry.
You're a nice guy.
Well, we're all
I'm
nice
way
guys,
worse
but
than
we
him.
all have a dark side. And sometimes I am very harsh and very unpleasant. I don't think I was with Robert. I don't understand what the problem is between us. He and I disagree over the cause of the Younger Dryas cataclysm. Robert Schoch believes that it was a massive solar outburst that brought this catastrophe about, and he focuses on the end of the Younger Dryas, 11,600 years ago. I'm more of the view that the Comet Research Group is right, and that we're looking at the effect of largely of airbursts of large cometary fragments right across the surface of the Earth, which caused the Younger Dryas.
Why are they mutually exclusive?
But I don't see why. No, I don't see why they're mutually exclusive. I don't see why one has to write off the other. What we both agree on is that the Younger Dryas between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago was an extraordinary global cataclysm,
Yes.
which changed everything, which extinguished all the megafauna of the Ice Age. We agree on that. And we agree that it likely wiped out a lost civilization of the Ice Age as well. We disagree on the mechanism, but I don't see why we shouldn't be friends for that. So, Robert, if you're listening, please let's work together, because we have many common enemies, and this is one of the problems with the alternative side.
Yeah,
is that
I brought this up, dude. When I went on Jimmy Corsetti, there were a lot of comments calling me a meth head. I have this nervous tick sometimes. You probably noticed me doing it a little bit during this podcast, where I would, like, I was doing this, but I was doing it like over and over again, and I became aware of it, but I just couldn't stop. I was nervous going on that large of a platform that was way bigger than anything I've ever done. And yeah, people were accusing me of being on meth. Yep, not on meth. Never tried meth. But that was funny. It was. I'm not. It was just Zins, brother. Promise you.
that there's a lot of infighting in the alternative side, and everybody's scrambling for their own bit of turf. Whereas the archaeological side, they're very unified in terms of attacking what they call pseudo-archaeology. They work as a team, and that teamwork makes them very efficient. We're very inefficient on the alternative side.
Well, I'm assuming, if I shouldn't be assuming, but I'm assuming it's the criticism. He probably wants to keep his job, and he said everything he wants to say. And
I'm not sure. I think Robert is open to doing television. The fact is, we invited him to come to Easter Island and to give his point of view, and he declined, and therefore he must have a strong reason to do that.
Oh, I hope he still loves you. But
I hope so too.
Has anybody speculated about how much time it would take to cover those Easter Island statues with sediment?
Thousands of years.
Thousands.
In Shock's view, yeah.
Thousands
of years. Yeah.
30 feet of dirt.
Mm-hmm. Remember, it's a small island.
Right.
It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
It's 2,000 miles from Tahiti and 2,000 miles from the coast of Peru.
It just seems strange that there's so many of those statues in this one area too. Like, what did
Hundreds
that
of them.
island
Hundreds of
signify? Like, why did they do that?
All right, 1 second. I just pulled this clip, and I'm going to listen to it, make
And
sure it works.
I'm very grateful to a number of completely independent, separate individuals on the internet who have drawn attention to some of what Flint did.
Yes.
One calls himself illegitimate scholar, and the other calls himself debunking. And they got into this material.
Wow. Ridiculous. That'll never get old.
It's what it calls itself, Te Pito o Te Henua, the navel of the earth.
Ooh.
It calls itself the navel of the earth, and it's not the only place. Delphi in Greece calls itself the navel of the earth. Heliopolis in Egypt, close to Giza, was a navel of the earth. Angkor Wat in Cambodia is a navel of the earth. Göbekli Tepe means the navel, the hill of the navel. This notion of navels of the earth, I think it's connected to an ancient geodetic survey of the earth, that there were certain anchor points that lines of longitude were drawn from by a civilization that didn't have our tech, didn't have our iPhones, but did explore the world, did sail the oceans. And I'm not surprised that we haven't found their ships, since we haven't found the ships from those who sailed to Australia or for those who sailed to Cyprus either. But it had abilities that we do not attribute to period of that time, and those abilities included the ability to calculate longitude, something that our civilization didn't crack until the 18th century. I suggest it's only a theory that these multiple navels of the earth around the world were fixed points on the earth where longitude connections were made. They were established places. So I do not think it's an accident that Angkor Wat is 72 degrees of longitude east of Giza, because that number 72 occurs in ancient myths all around the world and is strongly connected to this phenomenon called precession of the equinoxes, which, first of all, it changes the pole star. At the moment, the Earth wobbles on its axis, but it's a very slow wobble over 26,000 years. It changes the pole star. Now it's Polaris. In the past, it was Tuban. In the past, it was Draco. But now it's Polaris, because the extended north pole of the Earth is spiraling in the heavens, and it's pointing at different bits of space over a roughly 26,000 year period, 25,920 years to be exact. 1 degree of precession takes 72 years to unfold. That's why the fact that the relationship of the Great Pyramid to the Earth being on the scale of 1 to 43,200 is interesting. If it was on the scale of 1 to 57,000, I couldn't care less. But 43,200 is one of those numbers that we find in mythology and traditions all around the world. And there's very solid scholarly backing for this in a book I've mentioned to you before, which is called Hamlet's Mill by Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Deschen. Giorgio was professor of history of science at MIT. They draw attention to this, that there appears to have been a very ancient knowledge of this obscure astronomical phenomenon, which our culture attributes to the Greeks and thinks only goes back a couple of thousand years. Santillana and von Deschen were of the view that it goes back to what they called some almost unbelievable ancestor civilization of the remote past.
How could they even know that that was happening? Like, by what method could they make those calculations?
I can't confirm that, but I believe you.
Every 26,000 years. Like,
you have to observe for more than one human lifetime. You've got to keep observing.
And then extrapolate the wobble?
Well, you may have to observe for hundreds of years in order to conclude that it's a wobble is another thing. But to conclude that the skies are changing at a regular fixed rate, that's going to take observation over a few hundred years. 72 years is one human lifetime. In that 72 years, the precessional shift would be the equivalent of the width of your finger held up to the horizon. Very hard to note. But if you extend it for several hundred years, it'll be very clear that something is going on. And what's going on is the constellation that rises behind the sun, particularly notable at key moments of the year: the summer and winter solstice and the spring and autumn equinox. And the age in which we live, as anybody, of course, astrology is another one of those things that archaeologists despise.
Yeah.
But as anybody who follows astrology will know, we live in the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And that's because the sun on the spring equinox,
I did an interview with
within the next 150 years,
astronomy
is going to move entirely.
Somebody who studies astronomy. It was a while ago. It was like an episode in the 50s, maybe early 60s. And she talked about a lot of that, the age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces coming to an end. Yeah, me too, Randall. It's the best.
Out of Pisces, where it sits at the moment, and is going to move into Aquarius. The age of Pisces,
highly recommend
Pisces
checking
housing
that
the
out.
sun on the spring equinox, began around the time of Christ.
What's her name?
Just over 2,000 years ago. And before that, it was the
on
age
there.
of
It's one of the
Aries.
episodes.
We have all this ram symbolism in ancient Egypt at that time. Before that, it was the age of Taurus, constellation of Taurus housing the sun. All of this is a process that unfolds at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. So when I find that the Great Pyramid models the Earth on a scale of 1 to 43,200, which is 72 times 600, I wake up and I think this is interesting. And when I find that Angkor, one navel of the Earth, is separated from Giza, another navel of the Earth, by 72 degrees of longitude, that rings another bell. And I think that's something curious and worthy of exploration.
I think we also, when we talk about ancient people studying the sky, we think of the sky today. And our sky, unfortunately, is burdened by light pollution almost everywhere. Anywhere there's civilization, it's very difficult to see the stars.
Very difficult.
Whereas they had none of that, and they were in constant awe of this thing that they could see every night. And they probably had a very detailed understanding of where everything was, you know, in a way that you're
far more detailed than most people have today.
Right, because we don't have access to it unless you're in like deep wilderness and with a clear night sky.
The
we can really
presence of
see
the
it.
sky in our lives, if we're living in a city, is close to zero.
Yeah.
It's not zero, but it's close to zero.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre detachment that is propagated by technology.
Oh, yeah. Very, very much so.
Very weird, right? Because it's actually dangerous for us.
Yeah.
Because I think it makes us disconnected from the idea that we're connected totally to the universe, and that feeling of awe that you get when you see a completely star-filled night. I've talked about this before, but I'll say it again. I was in the observatory in the Big Island in Hawaii, and when you go up to the Keck Observatory, the sky,
hundreds,
you go through the
maybe
clouds.
1,000.
And when you get up to the top and you look, you can't believe that you could see it. You can't believe. I've been there 3, 4 times. Only once did we really catch it. The last time was pretty good, but one time we caught it perfectly where there was no moon in the sky and the sky was completely clear, and it was astounding.
Astounding, yeah.
You feel like it's a windshield and you are on a spaceship and you're flying through deep space.
Oh, I don't know
You
about
see
it
stars
exploding. I have no
everywhere.
It's
idea.
a beautiful way to put it. That's exactly what we are.
We're in a convertible. We're in a convertible spaceship flying through the universe. That's really what it is. And you don't see it every day because of light
Convertible
pollution.
flying through the universe.
I think it's one of the most... It's one of the saddest things about our culture. It's incredible that you can go out at night and you can see and, you know, drive and go to your favorite restaurant and go to the movies and all kinds of nice stuff. But what we're trading off is literally our connection to this insanely beautiful thing that hypnotizes you with its awe. It just... You look at this, if you get to go camping on a night where you see everything, it's incredible. It's one of the greatest things you could ever see.
Yeah.
And it used to be there for everybody, and it used to be how they lived their life.
It was an ever-present reality.
Yeah.
It was impossible to avoid it. And that is why it's so crazy to say that the phenomenon like precession wasn't discovered until the Greeks about 2,200 years ago, because the ancients were living with those skies for thousands and thousands of years before, and they were paying very close attention to them. There's strong evidence that the constellations of the zodiac were not inventions of the Greeks either. I mean, in a sense, the constellations aren't inventions because they happen to be on the path of the sun. The zodiac are the constellations which roughly are in the place in the sky that the sun occupies through the course of the year. That's why we see them. But there's increasing evidence that the Greeks inherited that, and that the knowledge was very early, and it may well go back into the Upper Paleolithic. There's this incredible figure of Taurus in the Hall of Bulls at Lascaux Cave in France, one of those cave paintings, which shows the stars of the Pleiades above the shoulder of the bull, exactly where they should be.
What is the oldest version of astrology that we have?
Well, again, you have the official position on this, and you have the unofficial.
What's the
position.
official position?
Well, the official position is that it's something that developed during the time of the late Mesopotamians and the Greeks. This notion that somehow there was a connection between the sky, events in the sky and what happens to us. But I think it's much older than that. I think the idea that the sky in some way determines our destinies is a very ancient idea, not a recent idea, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, it's weird to think this. I don't mean to be selfish to the human race, but we would not be here. No human beings would be here if it were not for that whole vast universe out there. It would be wrong to say that the universe exists so that we can be.
Right.
But the fact is we would not be. We're part of that huge cosmos. And you're right. It's forgetting that we're part of the cosmos, or regarding the cosmos as something that we must conquer, which is the modern mindset, which is most unhelpful.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by astrology, not like the newspaper astrology, like you're a Cancer, so that means this. But the idea that the time you were born, the place on Earth you were born, where you were conceived, all these play a factor in your personality, and that this was somehow or another mapped out by people thousands and thousands of years ago. I know a lot of people like to dismiss it as myth, and I've been one of those people, but part of me wonders if there is some sort of an impact that...
In magazines,
we know
it's
that
not
the
the
gravity
same.
from the moon affects the tides. We know that we're mostly water. We know that there's some sort of an effect that planets and gravity and stars must have on the entirety of the universe.
Yeah.
And the idea that these very bizarre biological entities, that their personalities and their existence is in some way motivated, shaped, or at least influenced by the position in the stars in which they were born, is very interesting. Because people studied that shit for a long time. If there was nothing to it, why have so many generations of people studied it?
I think it's a good question.
And what was the root of it? Like, how the hell did they figure that out?
Well, it must come from a place where we feel connected to the universe.
The Mayan
We feel that the
Aztec
universe
horoscope
influences
is
us
interesting.
directly.
Right.
Not the way we look at it at the moment as sort of something out there that doesn't mean much to us, except that we're going to conquer it with spaceships.
Right.
And go to the moon and go to
Yeah,
planets,
my
and
Mayan-
things like
Right.
that. But to see it
Right
as an
there
ever-present
at all
reality,
times.
we understand that we're affected
My
by
Mayan
the climate
calendar.
on planet Earth. We understand.
I have a
we're
bracelet. I don't know
affected
where it
by
is,
the
but
weather,
I have
by the
my
oceans,
Mayan
by the
zodiac
winds.
bracelet.
They affect us. They affect our personalities. So why shouldn't we be affected by the broader universe that surrounds us?
Yeah, it does make sense, but I've never heard anybody explain it. No, have you ever talked to like a legitimate, air quotes, astrologer?
No, I haven't. It's not been a central focus for me. My central focus has more been on the evidence for really precise ancient astronomy, particularly amongst the ancient Egyptians, but also fantastically advanced amongst the Maya in Mexico as well.
I clicked
and
Maya,
we have a big
I think.
focus on the Maya.
That was harder than I thought. I
in
wouldn't have
season
done that if I
2
realized.
Of Ancient Apocalypse, and I was fortunate, blessed, to have a brilliant archaeologist, Ed Barnhart, who joined me there in Palenque. And he's not sneering at me. He doesn't agree with everything I say. He's very clear on that. But he's not sneering at me, and he feels that there's something useful being contributed by this approach.
And so, is it generally agreed that there is a connection between the methods or the design of the construction and the correlation between star systems?
I don't follow the question quite.
Is it agreed by archaeologists that the reason why these things are constructed in a very specific direction and in a very specific design, that it is mirroring the cosmos?
I think that archaeologists are very reluctant to accept the broader idea. They are willing, they can hardly deny that some structures are specifically aligned to the equinoctial rising point of the sun, in other words, due east. And other structures are aligned to the rising or the setting of the sun on the summer or the winter solstice. That cannot be denied. Serpent Mound in Ohio is a classic example of that, which is oriented precisely to the setting sun on the winter solstice. But the broader idea that, for example, positions of stars in the sky might be replicated on the ground. That's an idea that archaeology completely rejects. And that's where I would like to pay tribute to my dear friend Robert Boval, who's been very ill for the last many years. But Robert Boval brought us the Orion correlation. And my God, did archaeology descend upon him like a ton of bricks for just noticing that the 3 great pyramids of Giza are laid out on the ground in the pattern of the 3 stars of Orion's belt. And then when we work precession into the equation, we find that they're not laid out in the pattern of Orion's belt as it looked in 2500 BC when the pyramids are supposed to have been built. They're laid out in the pattern of Orion's belt in 10,500 BC, 12,500
That's
years
evidence.
ago.
It might not
So it's
be
like a
stuff that
marker
archaeology cares
on the Giza
about. But it's
Plateau,
pretty dang
speaking to
clear
that age,
evidence.
just as Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe speaks to that age when in the astronomical diagram on that pillar.
Which also means that they would have been aligned 35,000 years ago as well.
Yeah, that's right, because it's a cycle.
Yeah.
It goes back.
Then the Sphinx is another one of those, right?
Yeah, the Sphinx is another one. The Sphinx aligned with it. It was looking at the rising sun, and behind it the constellation of Leo 12,500 years ago. But if you go back 26,000 years before that, you'll find the same alignment occurring. It's a cycle. It's not a one-off event. It's a cycle that recurs every 26,000 years.
It's a mind blower.
It's a mind blower, and that's why John Anthony West, who I'm so glad you had him on your show
Had him on a couple times. Yeah.
before he passed. He was such a genius and such a funny guy.
I recommend that to everybody. That Magical Egypt, the 2 DVD series that he had, they're amazing.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
wife hated them because I was watching them so often. She's like, "You watch this Egypt thing again?" I couldn't stop.
Yeah,
I probably watched it 30 times.
He was an absolute genius, and John was of the view that the Sphinx is more than 30,000 years old,
Yes.
rather than just 12,500 years old.
Well, that's what aligned so interestingly with Robert Schoch's analysis of the water erosion. That this is thousands of years of rainfall.
Yeah. That's the really important matter that Robert Schoch has brought to the table, which no other person has dared to do. Now, John Anthony West started that process. He was aware of a problem in the weathering of the Sphinx, but he wasn't quite sure what the problem was. He was following up some writings by a scholar called Schwaller de Lubix back in the 1920s or 1930s, who'd said something about water weathering on the Sphinx. And so John brought Robert Schoch there to Giza, and Robert Schoch immediately recognized the weathering patterns on the Sphinx as the result of heavy rainfall, exposure to heavy rainfall for thousands of years. And you have to go back to the Younger Dryas to get that kind of heavy rainfall in Giza. Hence the notion that the Sphinx geologically, whatever else we may say about it, is 12,000 plus years old. And it was courageous of Robert to do that. He put his own career in jeopardy, just like anybody who sticks their neck out in this field does. He put his own career in jeopardy by standing up for a much older Sphinx. And I just hugely respect him for doing that.
I also thought it was really fascinating that he showed images, cropped images of this water erosion to other geologists, and they all agreed it was water erosion until they figured out where it was.
There you go.
And they're like, I'm not signing off on that.
I love
that's
that.
Right. That's right.
I
It's
absolutely
just too
love that.
controversial.
Yeah, they circle the wagons at a certain point and
Go out to your career.
Yeah. Most unfortunately.
Well, we are very fortunate that you're out there, buddy.
Thank you.
We really are.
Thank you.
I love your show. I love you. You're always fun to talk to.
Can I say
appreciate you very much.
a couple of things about the show?
Sure, please.
First of all, thank you to the viewers of season 1 of Ancient Apocalypse, and I hope you'll enjoy season 2. I hope we're bringing really important new information to the table. And a special request, if you do like it, please give it a thumbs up on Netflix.
Oh, make
season
sure you
2
do
is
that.
all about the Americas. Secondly, I will be doing a speaking event in the US. It'll be the only speaking event that I do in 2025. And that's going to be in Sedona, 19th and 20th of April 2025.
That's a good place for it, all those freaks.
Yeah. 19th and 20th of April 2025, and it's going to be called The Fight for the Past, because I believe that's what's going on here. So I hope that people will enjoy the show and express that enjoyment. That would be really, really helpful.
I know they will. I know they will.
And the final thing I want to say is
really
thank you
good
to Keanu
from
Reeves.
what I've seen so far.
Thank you to Keanu Reeves for joining me on the show. Keanu reached out to me some years ago.
Flint
because
Dibble tried
he's
to get.
making this incredible comic book series called Berserker, Brzrkr, about an immortal warrior who's born 80,000 years ago but has the power of a god and cannot be killed. And back, I think, in at least 2 years ago, Keanu reached out to me for some advice, some historical advice on where in the world could such an individual have been born 80,000 years ago. And we talked about that, and we exchanged emails, and then we had some nice Zoom conversations together.
Oh, that's cool.
And I sense that this is a very open-minded, very curious, very interesting person. So when we were doing season 2, I did ask him, would you join me and speak about this and speak about your curiosity of the past? And he
Arizona,
knew what he was up
perfect.
against. Actually,
Yeah,
just
I'm gonna go
before
to that.
Keanu and I spent a day together filming for season 2 of Ancient Apocalypse, he'd watched the debate between me and Flint Dibble. He knew what he was facing getting into this, but he had, again, the courage and the integrity to stand up, to stand by me in that story. And I'm enormously grateful to him for doing that. And I found along the way, I suspected it when we knew each other just by Zoom and by email, I found along the way what an incredible gentleman Keanu Reeves is, how kind-hearted he is, how humble he is, how he turned up for the shoot carrying his own baggage. He's just a gem of a human being, and he radiates kindness and decency and care and love towards others, and I feel privileged to have had the opportunity to get to know him.
And Keanu
and I
Reeves
hope
does
our
not
paths
want to
will
talk to you, Flint.
continue to cross in the future.
Does not want
That's
to talk
awesome.
to you.
Above all, I'm grateful to him. for
Shout
being
out
part
to
of the show.
Keanu. He seems like an awesome guy.
He's an awesome guy. He's everything that people say about Keanu is right. He's
Beautiful.
a great man.
There he is. There's
Yeah.
two of you together.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Graham. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Bye, everybody.
Okay. Well, that's just amazing. Oh, screwed up my. All right, guys. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me on this. Again, if you want to support the show, Patreon. It's Patreon link below. I'll get monetized. I just got to get the letter and get the pin. I really screwed that up. It's unfortunate, but no big deal. That's fine. I'm not doing this just for the money. I mean, I need to live, right? But that's okay. So the Patreon link is down below. The Axios link is down below. I appreciate it. Totally not required, obviously. Please like the video if you didn't. Go to Patreon to support the show financially. That link is below. Thank you for being here. And yeah, I'm gonna go celebrate. I'm gonna go have pizza and a couple beers, a couple pints of Guinness. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in Connecticut. I'm not with my girlfriend right now, so I'm gonna go do that alone, which is okay. Yeah, let me see if my roommate wants to go. Whatever, doesn't matter. Patreon down below. Would really appreciate the support. Lowest tier is $2 a month, and I'll have the monetization back, so I get the ad revenue and donations re-enabled. Yeah, thank you guys. And any questions? Join the Discord. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I might go check out what Flint Dibble is saying now, but I don't know if I want to get the negativity in. We'll see. No big deal. All right. Bye, everybody.